Both bald spots showing?
Live.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. The mothership at coalitionradio.us, where you will find links to our new podcast, where we've started to roll out on an average about 1 or 2 a day, both current shows, current segments, put in a podcast format so you can listen through speaker, hopefully soon on iTunes and iHeartRadio. And you've also got a link to our YouTube page where you can watch the videos. The point is, we've got about 5 years worth of material that we're starting to dig through. This past week, we broadcast everything from an interview with Dr. Harrop, Mike Riley, at that time, Judge Flanders, recently retired Judge Flanders, recently off of the Central Falls bankruptcy beat, talking about what continues to be prescient. The looming, if you will, bankruptcy of the great city of Providence, the capital city. This, of course, from the campaign of 2014. We put together a broadcast from the Cool Moose himself, one of my favorite shows of all time, Robert Healy, that we recorded in 2014. And in light of both our guests this tonight and our ongoing commitment to supporting in whatever we can, the Rhode Island chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, we're going to continue to rebroadcast a show we call Why You Need to Join the ACLU Now, a comprehensive 1-hour history of the Rhode Island chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, recorded with Stephen Brown in studio during our Coalition 1.0 days, our digital days, on WPRO AM 630. So let's get right down to it. We've got 3 guests tonight, and a lot of the focus tonight is going to be on criminal justice, or should I say justice in the criminal justice system. As I mentioned, for 5 years now, when and wherever possible, we've attempted to support the mission of the American Civil Liberties Union. It is near and dear to my heart. As a young man, I grew up reading the Village Voice, America's first truly independent newspaper. A gentleman by the name of Nat Hentoff, who sadly passed away this year, was their civil liberties beat writer, in addition to covering jazz. Nat's claim to fame, something he took great pride and joy with, was that at one point or another, just about everyone on federal and New York state and city politics hated him. Because much like the mission of the American Civil Liberties Union, his, if you will, his loyalties were placed with the rights and freedoms associated with being an American citizen, or really your natural born rights associated with simply being a human being. One of his seminal books was a book called Free Speech for Me, but Not for Thee, which, talk about prescient. Follow that up 25 years later, it's still topical reading. So, as a function of the American Civil Liberties Union and their mission, again, to maintain civil rights, to maintain constitutional rights for everybody, regardless of what side you are on the aisle, the right, the left, or in our case, the Libertarian Party, the correct side of the aisle. An important part of the system is what I call warrior attorneys. Attorneys who have managed to, through diligent work, effort, and a commitment to the practice of law, operate largely, almost always on a pro bono basis, in favor of litigants pursuing their own civil or constitutional rights. The system is largely predicated on that. Your membership of the ACLU goes towards maintaining office, research facilities, a national organization, and probably the hardest working not-for-profit staff here in the city of Providence, here in the capital city. We are blessed in Rhode Island to, I believe, have one of the finest chapters of the American Civil Liberties Union anywhere. They're activist lawyers. When I mean activists, they're not pursuing left or right. They've moved well beyond that. They're pursuing your civil and constitutional rights. So it is with great pleasure from time to time that I'm able to have in studio, or often on the phone, attorneys who I like to ask them to do their victory lap. They've won a case that's important. In many cases, it's taken them months or years of their lives to litigate this case, in addition to running their own private practice, or perhaps at times they've been on loan from one of the larger law firms. regardless of the situation, they are patriots. Very often championing the rights of folks who are, quite frankly, unpopular in the popular culture at that moment in time, or causes that are very unpopular in the popular culture at that moment in time, in the culture wars, as we like to say. Regardless of that, they're doing the right thing, and they're taking their legal training and really putting it to use in a way that I believe is amongst the patriotic acts an American can engage himself in. So, joining me tonight for the first time in studio, she was kind enough to join us on the line a few weeks ago when we were talking about a case revolving around the ACI, is Sonia Dio. Sonia, welcome to the Coalition.
Thanks, Pat.
Sonia is a graduate of the SUNY system. She's a graduate of the Roger Williams School of Law. She's engaged here in private practice here in Rhode Island. She's got an employment law practice that she'll give her an opportunity to talk about. But from a personal perspective, she is deeply engaged in possibly one of the most challenging, at times unpopular, but most important engagement in civil rights you can imagine. On a personal level, as a libertarian, I'm chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party, full disclosure, and as a Methodist, one of the most important political areas of my life is prisoner rights. Again, given the current political climate, not very popular. But if you believe in the divine, if you believe in the ability of folks to resurrect themselves, I'll use the term common with this time of year, if you believe in redemption, then a critical part of the criminal justice system here in the state of Rhode Island or nationally is the ability of prisons to give folks the opportunity to seek redemption, to redefine themselves, to reinvent themselves, to rebirth themselves, literally. And so Sonia's been involved in a number of cases surrounding that, and that's what grabbed our attention. That's why I'm thrilled to have you here tonight. I really am, on a Friday night particularly.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your journey. You're not a native of Rhode Island.
Nope.
Neither am I. How did you get here, and what brought you here, and talk to us about your legal practice.
All right. I emanate from Saratoga Springs, New York, which is a little horse racing town up in the middle of nowhere.
Home of SPAC,
Indeed.
Saratoga Performing Arts Center.
Indeed.
Grateful Dead, 1983.
I didn't do that, but I certainly jumped a few fences heading in there when I was a kid. And came out here after doing 4 years out in the middle of New York to go to law school. Tried to leave, went to Connecticut for a year, and came back and haven't seemed to find a reason to leave yet. It's a nice little place, 20 years later.
Right. It is a toddling town, as they say.
It is. This is a great little place.
So what's your area of expertise in your day job, if you will?
I am an employment discrimination lawyer. In that, there are a couple of different things that fall in. One is sort of all of the things that go under Title VII, which is discrimination against a person based on their age, sex, orientation, religion, disability, country of origin. So that's sort of one part of the practice. The other part of my practice is enforcing wage and hour laws. You know, where people, a lot of times they're here that don't have proper papers, as they would say, aren't getting paid properly. So bring forth those complaints. But it's also people in sometimes highly paid salaried jobs that aren't getting overtime and things like that. So that is sort of my day job.
How did you find yourself in engaging with the ACLU? I mean, was there a moment in your life where you decided, okay, I'm going to take this expertise that I'm developing and I'm going to spin it around and really engage in some pretty challenging aspects of law?
Boy, Steve Brown called me and asked me if I would get involved with the civil death issue. I don't believe I had directly spoken with the ACLU before, but I had been doing some of the employment discrimination work, so I think that was sort of a natural transfer over. He saw my name, picked up the phone, called me, and here I am 6 years later, 5 years later.
Oh, okay.
I got roped in.
Right. So what, we're going to talk extensively about that because when you explained it to me on the air just a few short weeks ago, I was, like many Rhode Islanders, I think one of the most challenging aspects of fighting this issue is the ignorance amongst the populace of the actual situation, really having a key understanding as to how Rhode Island law works in that respect. But you were also involved in a case just a few weeks ago, revolving around, as I think I mentioned on the air, at what point in time does Rhode Island start putting workhouses involved? You've got a situation where you had fundamental heating issues
Right.
in the ACLU.
Right. What had happened is over at minimum security, they're old facilities, and the heating systems that were there began breaking down. And so what happens is we get this call from a gentleman who had been moved over from maximum security because they were in protective custody, and largely isolated from the rest of the population over there, and they're not getting any heat. And we have reports of heat down into the 50s, and the inmates are complaining. They're telling us about how they're taking steps to try to prevent the cold air from blowing into the block and into the cells. And we got involved and were able to set up a system where we could monitor what was going on with the temperature. It became pretty clear quickly that the ACLU, or the ACLU rather, the ACI had taken steps to put in some measures to fix it, at least in the interim. After that, we dismissed the suit once the weather got a little warmer.
Right. But it strikes me, and I've followed this for quite some time, so I don't know if I'm being fair here or not, but as a more than casual observer, it strikes me that the ACLU is still having to constantly engage with the state of Rhode Island, whether it be quality of life issues for prisoners, whether it be issues revolving around UHIP and Health and Human Services. All of these are fundamentals. There's, as I say, there's not a lot of rocket scientists here. There's not. These are things that they should be doing organically, things you need to know by simply breathing.
I agree with that.
Why then is there this constant give and take with the state of Rhode Island? I mean, almost so many areas surrounding criminal justice system, there is established law and established court precedent already. Why do we think that we can, for lack of a better term, keep screwing with this as a state?
Because absent groups like the ACLU, there's no check. The bottom line is, and I don't want to say people are lazy, but I think when you're talking about allocating dollars and you're allocating staff to a particular issue, I don't think you're going to do that until such point in time as you're aware somebody is paying attention to it and forcing you to do your job. And these, particularly the prisoners, they have no voice.
Right.
They don't have the ability to vote. They don't have the ability to, in real time, contact their representatives or congressmen or anything like that. They can send a letter, right? But what is that really doing for them? So it really does fall on groups like the ACLU to go ahead and try to protect them a little bit. That being said, there is another group here, the Center for Justice, that actually has a lawyer who is there on a one-year fellowship who is dedicated solely to protecting prisoners and their rights. And I think that needs to be noted too, because they are doing some great work.
No, absolutely. I guess what's frustrating, we occasionally run a little segment called City Councils Gone Wild, because this is not just at the state level. There are city councils all over Rhode Island who constantly attempt to redefine, again, established law, whether it be the medical cannabis program, certain zoning issues. And I wonder if at any one time it would be perhaps a worthy project by a college intern to simply round up over a given 5-year period the sheer amount of money that municipalities, quasis, state government organizations have literally wasted by engaging these flights of fancy. Because to your eternal credit and the attorneys surrounding the ACLU, you almost always win, and if you lose, there's often, the state has such a black eye because of the ACLU's ability to articulate in a rather dispassionate manner a clear elicitation of the facts, which are often horrific.
Right.
I mean, the state probably didn't cost them any money per se in terms of legal fees, maybe a few hours, this or that, on this most recent case involving heating. But every Rhode Islander woke up to the news one morning, thanks to your efforts, that we're not providing basic heat in the middle of literally sub-zero weather.
Yeah.
You've got a, and this is, there's an element of stewardship that's supposed to be involved with regard to governmental functions. You know, you are stewards, if you will, of the people's money, the people's assets. And it's clear, and I'll do this editorial for 2 seconds or less, it's clear that that's not happening because again and again and again. We had a situation, we had one of your brethren here on the air about 6 or 8 months ago with a situation in Narragansett when they were trying to limit how many people could live in a home who weren't related.
Yep.
The identical, actually, sorry, one person less had been litigated successfully by the ACLU a generation before.
Yeah, and it's the same sort of thing that we're facing right now with the issue I'm here with you before today, on this sort of whether an inmate has their federal constitutional rights and whether they can proceed with them in state court. All right, okay, not for nothing, but that's been litigated in other states. That's been dealt with by the Supreme Court, yet Rhode Island is like, meh, all right, no problem. We're not going to do that. Yeah, it's baffling to me why that is what happens. I will also say, though, too, that I think as lawyers, you know, involved with the ACLU or not, I think we're all charged to some degree to try to step in and steward the system ourselves. You know, as is the populace, incidentally.
Right.
We all have a role to play.
Well, if you could give a report card as someone who is keenly aware, but yet somewhat outside the bubble, if you will, of the criminal justice system in this state, and particularly with regard to incarceration. You know, by the way, just as an aside, as I'm driving in, there's Mr. Ferruccio, who is the executive in charge of something called RIPCO, which is the Rhode Island Brotherhood of Correctional Officers, is making a compelling case to try to get some type of transparency on the state's decision to close the Supermax temporarily, to move, you know, desperately challenge criminals into, you know, I'm being exaggerating here to a degree, but into closer into the general population. How would you grade the system here in Rhode Island?
Well, you know, you have to understand I'm a civil lawyer, right? So I'm not involved in the day-to-day criminal system where people get locked up. I really do look at this from the perspective of what goes on with civil liberties. And, you know, it's hard to grade. What I can say is that there have been many changes recently. I think back in the late 90s, early 2000, there was much more of a push towards educational programs and rehabilitative services, and then that went away. And in some respects, that is starting to come back into the institutions, which is a good thing. At the same time, we have issues like there not being heated intake, which is simply baffling to me, or issues where, you know, we have reports of prisoners being subjected to just really horrible conditions over at Max, which, you know, come on that line of inhumane behavior. And then you've got the whole issue of inmates that are still being segregated 23 out of 24 hours a day, both with and without disabilities. And you look at that and you have to wonder, when you've got other states that are meeting these sort of minimum requirements, why we're not.
Right, and, you know, and as I'd like to point out, and I tease my Republican friends all the time, that there's a Bill of Rights and constitutional amendments that exist well beyond the Second Amendment.
Yeah, well,
and one of them, you know, specifically prohibits cruel and unusual punishment.
That would be the eighth.
And we're going to discuss that in just a moment or two. But again, we have a responsibility to two groups of people in that building. Number one, we have a responsibility to the professionals who work there to create an environment that's both safe and professional. And any of these extreme measures do not make them safer, nor does it create a professional environment for them. It just doesn't. So there's, for folks who are fans of this sort of knee-jerk law and order, let's go back to the Middle Ages, it doesn't work on any level. It simply doesn't, regardless of how you feel about redemption. And there is no group of individuals under our American Constitution that is beyond having the opportunity to be safe, to live in decent standards, and also have an opportunity for legal help, regardless of their situation, where they are in terms of their incarceration and the education of their particular court case. No one. That's simple. That's a fundamental tenet of our American legal system, and I think we need to remind people of that. Shockingly, yes, we do. And ultimately, most of these people will re-enter "quote-unquote" society at some point in time. And congratulations, we'll really show everybody if they come out hell-bent on destruction again.
Well, and that's the whole thing. One of the issues with how all of this is being done is sort of the impact you're having on the inmate. For example, you have someone who has a life sentence, which are a lot of the prisoners I'm dealing with. You prevent them from getting married. You make it so it's more difficult for them to re-enter. Mm-hmm. You have a situation where someone who might otherwise be married and be able to come out to a spouse mm-hmm. and come out to a family many times ends up further isolated. Mm-hmm. So there's that impact. The secondary impact of that is that we know that strong relationships for individuals that stay in prison put them at a place where they're less likely to be violent offenders in prison, right. where they're less likely to cause problems, but we deny that. Going a step further for those individuals with life sentences, what we do is we take away all of their property. We say you can't own anything, you can't have anything while you're sentenced. So they don't even have the bare minimum to come out to. And that is setting up a situation, at least with that population, where you're making it incredibly difficult for them to come out and not be subject to recidivism. Then, and we'll just add this too, you look at what happens when they get parole. Because I was, a few days ago, I was looking at a whole bunch of parole meetings. Believe it or not, they have paroled 16 inmates with life sentences in Rhode Island in the last 16 months. Mm-hmm. But each of these people have to have a plan to come out. So we're stripping from you the ability to actually have a good, strong family. Oh, but you can't come out unless you've got a plan to have a job, a place to live, and a family to be with. Right. Good luck.
We know how that movie ends. we really do. And so, I mean, and to sum it up, and take a moment break to introduce our sponsors, for lack of a better way, and I'm sure you've heard this before, as an outsider, I look now that a death sentence, or I should say a life sentence, is actually a death sentence.
A death sentence might be better.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes.
And I think back a couple of years ago, there was significant controversy about good time regulations. Yeah. And it's interesting because, full disclosure, I have members of my family who are correctional officers in a couple of states. I have a very close family member who retired from something called the CEA last year, which is the Corrections Educational Association of America, mm-hmm. which, as you pointed out, in the state, now he worked in the state of Connecticut, where there is actually a unified school system that operates completely within the correctional system, with guidance counselors, with, you know, they approach it exactly like a school system.
We don't have that here.
So, no, we don't.
And it's a problem.
Well, and so, like, say, for example, good time law. If you're an outsider and you're just kind of, you watch too many Law and Orders or too many episodes of Oz, you have this bizarre interpretation that good time laws are being weak. When in fact, and I love your interpretation of this, but from what I've spoken to actual correctional officers, most of the CIOs I know are in favor of them because they provide hope for people and they provide a reason to be, quite frankly, well behaved.
That's what you want. I mean, you want well-behaved prisoners, believe it or not. And I think society should be tied into this idea that we want well-behaved prisoners, we want people that are actually rehabilitated to some extent and can come out and actually be productive members of society. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think the good time laws probably statistically would decrease the amount of violence against some of the correctional officers.
Right.
It's just a wild guess here, but it has to.
Ultimately, at a certain point, if you withdraw hope at every single level for a class of individuals, there's nothing to live for.
It's true.
And it evidences itself in some pretty destructive ways, as you've seen. I want to take a quick break right now. We're blessed by the appearance of Sonia Diaz. She's an attorney. She has her own private practice revolving around labor law and employment law. She spends a great deal of time engaged with the ACLU and Stephen Brown around, well, I guess, I don't know, what would you call it, prison law, correctional law? What would you call it? Is it a classification?
I think what I do is called prisoners' rights work.
Prisoners' rights work, okay.
Yeah.
And here at the Coalition, we are profound believers with both the ACLU and, yes, the rights of prisoners. And no, that does not make us weak on crime. This segment, by the way, is brought to you by the fine folks at Yacht Club Soda, yachtclubbottlingworks.com, Rhode Island's premier boutique soda. In business over 100 years in Rhode Island. It was boutique soda before we even knew we needed boutique soda. Natural flavorings, clear, clean water, real cane sugar as opposed to that crazy fructose whatever stuff. Folks, you know, we're coming up on some of the most holiest times of the year, regardless of what religious belief you ascribe to. You're going to be spending a great deal of time with dinner and meals and family. Why not serve the very best? Yacht Club Soda, as we always say here, just say no to the refinery soda, no to those big plastic jugs of chemicals. Enjoy the very best. YachtClubBottlingWorks.com. They are open in their Centerdale location, and they've got distribution all over Rhode Island right now through McLaughlin and Moran. If you go to a store or a restaurant or a tavern or a drinking establishment and they aren't using Yacht Club soda or mixers, well, go to the bartender and say, you know, listen, you prefer Rhode Island's boutique soda. YachtClubBottlingWorks.com, a longtime supporter of the Coalition. As we always say when we talk about our advertisers and supporters, if you're willing to support programming like this, then you really do care about the community. You're involved. And, you know, particularly on shows like this is not easy for a local company and advertiser to embrace. And I give a lot of credit to the folks who support us. Yacht Club Soda, Yacht Club Bottling Works. We'll talk about beacon shipping logistics and, of course, air science. Again, joining me for the first time in studio, the second time on the show, is Sonia Diaz. She is an attorney, a graduate of the Roger Williams School of Law. We're talking about prisoners' rights. Well, we kind of teased it in the first segment. We talked about the notion that a life sentence is a death sentence. You are litigating a case right now where this really brings this to the fore. I can't possibly do justice to this.
Well, hold on. You're under a misimpression.
Okay.
We are litigating this issue. I am not litigating that case. I just want to correct.
Right. Litigating, I should say, an issue that is an outgrowth of an ongoing case. And actually, that person is already been sentenced to a life sentence, correct?
Right. Well, what we've got going on, let me just explain this to you, is broadly, the ACLU is going ahead and putting together litigation to challenge the constitutionality of the civil death statute.
Right.
We've had some other cases before this, and I sent you some materials about some of the work that I've done on this issue. But largely, we are completely and totally against this statute. We are working both up at the House and Senate to try to get it repealed, and setting up litigation to move forward to try to once and for all get rid of this statute. So that's sort of the landscape of where we are.
Right.
As for anything pending right now, there actually isn't.
Okay.
But there's little things that keep going around. On, I think it was Wednesday of this week, we had an order come down from the Supreme Court with respect to one of the prisoners, Cody Allen Zab, who I represented at one point. Zab was trying to have a marriage that he had when he was in prison for life annulled, because the statute itself says you can't get married when you're in prison. And the Supreme Court said, what are you doing before us? You have no right to be here. The only thing the courts can decide on is whether or not you're civilly dead. I mean, that was the decision earlier this week.
Right, and that's why I want you to explain the statute, if you will.
Yeah.
It's stunning.
The statute is stunning. Let me give you some history. The statute was enacted back in 1909. And at the time the statute was enacted, most of the states in the United States had similar statutes already existing. Rhode Island was incredibly late to this party. But the thought used to be that if you had a life sentence, that you should have the ability to get married, your property taken away, all these other things, because that was sort of the Byzantine way of prison at that time. What's happened is in the last, 70 years, those statutes have largely been repealed, and we are the only state that's enforcing it at this point. New York ostensibly has the statute on the books. It's been held to be unconstitutional. Idaho has it but doesn't enforce it, and then you've got the Virgin Islands. And who knows what they do, but from what I can tell, they don't enforce it either. So it's really Little Rhodey that is enforcing the statute that says that once you are imprisoned on a life sentence, that you lose your right to get married, you lose your right to real property, you lose your right to any property. You lose all civil rights. You can't go before the courts. Basically, you lose everything. You're dead for all purposes. And the implications of that are just sort of crazy.
Right. Now, there was litigation against the prior administration of the ACI, which involved one of your former, litigants.
Correct.
That they were living under inhumane circumstances in the ACI. Here we go again. One allegation was that the steam being emitted from the ACI system was literally causing mold and causing heavy respiratory distress.
Right.
So real stuff.
Mice.
Yeah.
They won't give them clothes. None of that stuff. And the response, this guy files this complaint in state court pro se by himself, right? And alleges violations of his, state rights under some weird state statutes. I have to tell you, it's not something I would have done. And then he alleges some violations of his federal rights, okay, and state constitutional rights. The state of Rhode Island responds with a motion to dismiss and says, you can't bring the complaint pursuing any of these because you're civilly dead.
You literally have no
you
standing.
you have no right at all. Now,
Right.
Here's what you have to understand, is that the U.S. Supreme Court has said no. You absolutely have the right to go ahead, irrespective of what your situation is, and proceed with actions in court to protect your rights under the U.S. Constitution. So that was the position the Attorney General's office took on the issue. All right. Well, all fairness, that's the position the ACI took on the issue. I enter and oppose this motion to dismiss, saying, whatever you're doing here, you can't do this. The statute's unconstitutional 5 ways to Sunday. Oh, and incidentally, the U.S. Supreme Court has said he always has the ability to proceed under the federal Constitution, and they withdrew their motion to dismiss. So it's sort of baffling why the ACI would be challenging the ability of a prisoner to file suit trying to protect their federal rights under the statute. Just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's clear, it's base law. It's been decided 3 or 4 times. This is not a new thing.
Right. Well, and explain to us the process. Like I said, we've all, on our side of the fence, watched way too much TV. And at the end of the 1-hour segment, somehow it's magically declared unconstitutional, and somehow magically, there's a song and dance routine. Everybody's happy, and we have the closing credits, and we'll see you next week.
Can we do that?
In Rhode Island, we need closing credits badly. All right. Rhode Island's kind of like a bad game show. Everyone goes home a loser, and there's always parting gifts. But the question here is, first of all, if you hadn't been there, if essentially no one had objected and he was operating pro se,
Yeah.
what possibly could have happened in a case like this? I mean, the state's attorneys, despite what we think are, they're highly qualified attorneys. They know the case law.
Oh, yeah.
Are they just taking a shot just to see if, it's kind of like when you go to a used car dealership, the guy offers you $500 for your trade to see if you take it?
I'd like to believe that, at least in that instance, the attorney that filed the motion to dismiss, at least the federal claims, did not realize they were wrong. I'd like to believe that. But it's concerning, because you should know that. Like, I knew it. When the guy called me, or he didn't call me, when we got the letter and I went in to see him, I looked at him and said, what? Come on. Right. And this is not what I do. And that's the other thing I need to be clear about is, it's not what I do. I know that. So they should know that. These are the prisoners, or these are the lawyers that are representing A.T. Wall and the staff over there.
Right. This is their area of expertise.
They should know this. But what happens if people like me don't exist and that doesn't get raised? Well, they get steamrolled. And really the concern with this, right, and why this is such a major issue in my mind, is because without an inmate being able to go to state court and raise all of the protections they have under the Rhode Island Constitution, if they're denied the ability to go into the federal Constitution for some weird reason, right, they have no rights at all. So all of these life prisoners could literally be raped, beaten, murdered, tortured, starved, not given medical care, denied the ability to research cases.
And by the way, let me jump in. For every one of anyone who's listening say that can't possibly happen here, we also this week had a major announcement from the ACLU talking about the Wyatt Center in Central Falls, where just those very things were happening to the point that the federal government decided to, at a certain point a few years ago, decertify, if you will, their ability to accept federal prisoners.
Right.
So this is not, what you're alleging as potential consequences are not far-fetched. They are happening within driving distance of the studio on a routine basis.
Well, I hope people aren't getting murdered and raped in prison, but I assume some
Prison
of that is
rape
happening.
Prison
It
rape
does
is a
happen.
huge issue in terms of a separate
Yeah.
area of prison law, if you will,
Yep.
and it's a huge problem.
It is. It is. It's just, to me, it's so striking that you have this class of prisoners with life sentences. Now, under the Rhode Island sentencing statutes, a life sentence in Rhode Island is 26 years if you have parole, or the ability to have parole. Then you can go up for parole hearing. So a life sentence isn't a life sentence.
Right.
And for people who were sentenced years ago, it's even less than that. I mean, we've had sentencing reforms to make it longer. But for the most of these guys, they're getting out at some point. You have prisoners who are sentenced to 100-year sentences. One guy was sentenced earlier today to 50 years in prison, 40 to serve. He will do more prison than somebody that got a life sentence in most instances, right?
Wow.
He can get married, he can go to state court, he can protect himself. The guy who gets the life sentence can't, and he may serve less time. Just unbelievable.
Again, I get back to my earlier allegation. It just seems so. I mean, with all of these allegations coming out in lockstep, and this has been going on for a couple of months now. One has this feeling that one's in 18th century England or something like that, or out of a bad movie, but it's reality. So, right now, then, as far as in that case, the state backed off.
Yep.
Because they had to. Are there situations that you're aware of where they've actually used that as a crutch, a legal crutch, and won?
Well, they're winning in those. Let me try this again. They are being successful in negligence cases. If I'm bringing a case and saying that, as a life prisoner, I've had some sort of negligence happen, our Supreme Court is generally saying, no, you can't bring those claims. But those are not the constitutional claims. And in none of those cases has the actual constitutionality of the statute been challenged, which is what we're setting it up to do.
So, one of the challenging aspects from the perspective of the ACLU is that in order to challenge these bad law, if you will, you've actually has to display injury by someone. I would imagine in most cases, someone needs to have suffered from it,
Well,
or are you? Is the ability, for, again, civilians' terms here, is the ability to gain some type of injunction enough to potentially overturn the law? How do you, in court, make this law go away, if it's in fact possible?
Well, I think that we need a combination of all of the above in our pleadings, which is what we're working on doing. I think that you have to have a bit of an injury that attaches to a person, whether that's an Eighth Amendment violation, a First Amendment violation, due process, whatever. We need something that ties in that brings us into an injury. I think we also need a declaratory part of that. So we have to have this case that sort of goes, you've got a negligence claim or you've got a own personal liberty claim. that would be recognized under Rhode Island state law in addition to all of the federal stuff. I think you need both.
Okay. Or I should say, there's the legislative approach.
Which we're trying. We really have. I mean, the bill has been up there, oh God, at least since 14, maybe 13 even. I have testified in favor of it numerous times. We're not really getting opposition, we just can't get it through.
So it's more the sort of passive-aggressive approach that if you're an activist like I am, is sort of the hallmark, if you will, of the Rhode Island State Legislature. You know, people are afraid to, in one sense, actively fight it, but at the same time, they can let the system just sort of eat it alive.
Yeah, if I had $500,000, I think I could get it through.
Who, if you don't mind me asking, who are your sponsors, or do you have sponsors this time around?
Oh gosh, you can ask me that. I don't remember who they are. You know, they're on the bill. That's a question for Steve Brown.
Okay.
You know, because I'm certain Steve's the one that's, you know, up there banging the bushes to get somebody to sponsor that sort of legislation. It's not me.
Right, you have to have someone with a keen eye to civil liberties and a willingness to absorb the assaults of being soft on crime.
Well, it's not soft on crime. I mean, I'm
with you.
I'm sorry, but this civil death bill is not soft on crime. I don't think anyone is saying that you serve a life sentence and it should be roses and you know, clouds. But this idea that you're serving a life sentence and you know, suddenly because of that you're losing all sorts of your familiar rights even. Like, you know, if the statute is carried on through, then the person's dead. They don't have any rights to the children. They have none of that. I mean, it's horrible.
Right, and see, but you clearly come from a place where, number one, you understand civics, number two, you understand civil rights, and number three, you've got a keen sense of justice. Unfortunately, in today's political environment, and it's been like this for quite some time, I mean, how do we get 3 strikes you're out? Because you had the mob, you know, using tragedies to push legislative agendas, which then impacted sentencing regulations.
Right.
So when I say it's soft on crime, the accusation, for example, I'm anti-death penalty to my core.
Okay.
On multiple levels, I'm anti-death penalty. It goes against everything I stand for. And people will look me right in my face and say, then if your child dies, then are you going to be happy then? I've had people say that to me because I've testified against the death penalty, and I will do everything I can in civil society here in Rhode Island to make sure that it never happens here. Okay. But that same type of mob rule, you know, which conflates civil liberties with this sort of mob aggression.
But there's a misunderstanding. I mean, it's a fundamental misunderstanding is what it is. It isn't that, you know, any of us that are in support of the repeal of the statute thinks, you know, that these people don't deserve to be behind bars and they don't deserve the sentences they got and they don't deserve all of those things. It's not that. It's more of a practical, you know, brass tacks. If these people are getting out, we need them to have connections. We need them to be rehabilitated so they don't do it again. You know, you've set up a system where you're going to let them out. We got to kind of try to fix them before we let them out.
Well, and again, it's the mob sense of justice that doesn't think beyond the immediate reaction.
Right.
Right. Great. We showed them. You know, we've turned this person into a bitter, cynical, potentially violent individual, even if their initial crimes may not even have been violent.
Yeah.
They may have been financial. They may have been, there's any one of a number of reasons why you can get a very long sentence in today's justice system. That being said, we allow on a consistent basis in the political side of our justice system to let tragedy impact policy. And we have to stop doing that because there are, I won't even call them unintended unknown consequences anymore. Rational thought, an extension of the situation to see what the possible consequences are, tell us at this point in the year 2019 exactly what will happen if we perform X. And again, 3 strikes you're out is my favorite example of that. Everybody thought 3 strikes you're out was going to be the saving grace back in, what, the 80s? When in fact it led to overcrowded prisons, when it led to a sense of hopelessness, when it actually increased criminality amongst people seeking to evade police, led to the, you know, and 100 different bad things happen because of 3 strikes you're out.
Well, and my favorite example of that is the 23-hour-a-day lockup.
Okay, talk about that, please.
You want to make people mentally ill. I mean, you have mentally ill people that are being locked up 23 hours a day.
Right.
Okay. The impact of that on them psychologically and the ability of them to function and what happens is just insane. It is horrible. We know that. It's been litigated across the board. But the same thing happens with regular prisoners that have disciplinary issues that end up in that 23-hour-a-day situation. So what we're doing is we're making them sicker so that they come out crazier. Well, maybe that's a bad term, but they come out more violent, they come out more angry, they come out with more problems, and then we turn around when they offend inside prison and put them back in 23-hour-a-day segregation.
Right, and this
It's
is
the worst idea ever.
Right, and this is actually, I'm talking, you and I are talking about a medical, scientific reaction that's physiologically based to 23-hour lockdowns. This is not, they feel bad about themselves. This is not, they're mad because they had a bad week. This is, if you do this, X, Y will happen. It's almost guaranteed.
Right, and I mean, it's a reflection of us as a society stepping back on some of the mental health treatment. So what we have going on is we have people that are being in prison for things when they really need mental help. It's a problem.
And as long as, from the top on down, we conflate public policy with some type of value judgment on an individual leader's ability to discern criminality, civil rights, issues like that, we elect people right now based on emotion. And there is very little attempt made anymore at any level to discern the potential impact of any one of these laws that affect our criminal justice system.
I'll tell you this, I was watching what's going on with the Brexit situation in Britain today, and I was thinking exactly that issue. If we addressed the positions of the parties like I think of what's going on in Britain, you know, because I'm not married to it. It's just, oh, that's what's going on. We could make intelligent choices and take emotion out of it.
Right.
And that's part of the problem.
Well, if you look here in the United States, the war on drugs, you know, boy, we showed them, we arrested them for possessing a plant. The long-term implications of the war on drugs are staggering. For folks who watch this show or heard me testify at this, we call it Mordor up there. You know, I pointed out last week again for the 400th time that the war on drugs increases criminality and has the opposite impact of every single thing that you want to prescribe if you think about criminalizing drugs. It's just, you're doing X to promote A when in fact B cubed is happening. And possibly the most telling part of that is the second report by the Department of Justice as to the underlying causes of Ferguson.
Yeah.
The police state that was put in place to wage the war on drugs had a decided impact on creating an environment where criminality occurred.
Yes.
You drop a bunch of people with tanks.
Yeah, and it's the same thing the ACLU talks about here all the time. I testified on a bill last year about the ability to suspend the registration because of parking tickets. Okay, so what happens? You get a parking ticket, you get another parking ticket, you can't pay the thing, and then suddenly you can't register your car. And then if you drive a car without a registration, you get the car taken away. And then you've got a person who went from a parking ticket to not being able to get to work.
Right.
Over a $15 parking ticket.
I had that same conversation with someone at the Division of Taxation today, who shall go unnamed, who talked about, you know, and I mentioned to him, and he was very polite, didn't respond, but I mentioned to him the lunacy of taking people who owe money in taxes and suspending their license so that if they drive without it, they're criminals.
Yep.
And if the goal is to get people to pay their taxes, we ain't helping.
No.
And in fact, you know, you talk about the prison pipeline in this state. It's we as a state, our entire taxation, our entire motor vehicle code, it seems to be geared towards putting people, taking ordinary citizens, in It's criminalizing them at some level.
Our disability services for students with disabilities, I mean, I'll throw this at you. You have students that have intellectual disabilities that then act out when they're in school. They end up in the truancy system. They end up in a pipeline going from that into our prisons. So, I mean, it goes back further than that.
Wow.
It's not just, I mean, it is a linear line that goes all the way up through.
Right. We, you know, as I like to say in situations like this, we have seen the enemy and he is us.
Yes, indeed. And we're doing a great job.
Congratulations, little roadie. And yet, at the same time, folks here in Rhode Island would think of themselves as, you know, an extension of that shining city on the hill in Boston. And, you know, we are in the cradle of American civilization, and we consider ourselves quite progressive in our thought. And yet, on an operational basis, we're a nightmare.
On our actions, we do a horrible job. It's true.
Okay, so I know you're involved in a sense in testifying the legislation. You're not
Yep.
involved in the nuts and bolts of the legislation.
Right.
But if you know, we just got a couple minutes left, and I want to give you a chance again to talk about your practice. If you were going to send a message to Rhode Islanders who might hear this or might hear me talk about it and say, you know, again, that knee-jerk reaction, why is this so important to regular Rhode Islanders who are not part of the system?
It's so important because of one thing and one thing only. We need to stop the cycle. All of this stuff we're talking about is how we create more criminals. When we create more criminals, we take husbands and wives or parents from their families. And when you do that, you're affecting the next generation. You affect their ability to receive education. You affect their ability to operate outside of state assistance. You create situations where they're more likely to need additional services at school. You're just banging on your own tax bill going right on up. You're creating a cycle, and at some point the wheel has got to stop.
Because we literally are the rats on the wheel, right?
We've created it. And you know, it's one little place that could stop. I don't think the civil death bill is going to fix all of it, okay?
Right.
But it's a starting point. And you know, we have to go through and deal with these particular situations one at a time and try to fix them. I mean, that's sort of what we all should be doing as stewards of our own system, right?
Right.
But that's what we have to do. You got to start chipping away, because if you don't, you continue to perpetuate the problem.
I hope you'll keep us up to date. I know Stephen will, hopefully, on the progress of this bill. This is the challenge if you're an activist, and I can speak to this personally, is that right now there are a couple of thousand pieces of legislation that have been generated just in this session.
Yep.
So the organizations I'm involved with a couple of people have kind of stepped aside. Okay, let's try and figure out a way to either automate it or so that we can actually respond through this sort of sea of bills that are, you know, being thrown at us, just dumped on us minute by minute,
Yep.
and try and understand what is it that we have to pick from literally the needle in the haystack. And it's so difficult because, you know, for example, last year our group missed out on the if you will, you've got the prescription medical database in the state.
Yes.
And, you know, it's the then Attorney General, who shall not be named, decided that it was a good idea that police wouldn't need any sort of legal service or legal process to be able to obtain access to this. No warrants. We don't need those stinking warrants, right?
No, not at all.
And all of a sudden the bill passed. Because meanwhile, you know, in my case, I'm fighting against a baseball stadium, and other people are fighting against this and that. It's legislative whack-a-mole, and I've become so cynical as to the process that I truly believe it's intentional. Just to keep throwing it out, and every year, something, a DNA database, something, you know, the ability to call something a memorandum and to then be able to obscure any sort of legal access to it
Yep.
for activist groups. The situation in our next segment we're going to talk about where, you know, normal records now have to be sourced. You have to have a true application and go through all sorts of legal proof in order to gain the most basic information about the behavior of the police in our society.
Yep.
You know, everything. This isn't a coincidence, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I truly believe there are elements in the state government. I'm not going to ask you to comment on this because I know you practice law before them, but there are elements in this community and the government that are hell-bent on incorporating these facets into everyday life. It can't be happenstance, it can't be circumstance.
No, and they're trying to grind us down.
Step by step.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
And if I can come full circle, it's good people like you, and we've had a couple of dozen. We've been blessed that lawyers like you do two things. Number one, you take an enormous amount of time from your personal life and your professional life to either litigate or research cases like this, and you're willing to come on, public affairs shows like this to talk about it, and to which I can only say we are profoundly grateful.
Well, thank you for having me.
Because as tough as the situation is here, I shudder to think what civil life would be like in this state and in this city and where we're sitting right now if it wasn't for the volunteer attorneys surrounding the American Civil Liberties Union. It would be,
And I shudder to think what it'd be like without Steve Brown.
Right.
Because not for nothing, he is generally the person that is the battery power behind all of this.
Oh,
that man is phenomenal.
Tireless. I've been up there 3 or 4 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Depending on what side you are of a particular civil liberties issue, there is very often a concerted effort to vilify Stephen Brown. Mm-hmm. Just the sheer physical commitment he has to the rule of law, to civil rights, is astonishing. I've been up there at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm tired. And, he's managing all of these disparate situations.
Yep.
And he's up there testifying constantly. And his testimony is on point, it's articulate, and the range of bills with which his group, and it's a small office.
It is.
Is able to corral is, just on a sheer intellectual level, is astonishing. So.
Yeah, he is amazing.
Tell us once again how folks. Let's get back to you've got a private practice here, and
I am the straight shooter.
I love that.
You can find me. You can find me online. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big promoter of my practice. I got enough business. But what I will say is this. Certainly everywhere on the internet, you will find me. Mm-hmm. And, we do employment and discrimination work. And, if you have wage and hour problems, come on in. We'll take care of you.
And there's only a handful of very good employee law, labor law practitioners in the state. We're blessed to have them because I've been in the situation where I've needed someone like you.
Yeah.
And without folks like you on a professional level, stepping aside from the ACLU involvement, it is very difficult in a state like this to gain justice as an employee.
But that's the other reason that people like me exist, mm-hmm. is, again, to enforce those sort of laws. I mean, it all goes together, sort of how I was brought up. It's what we do.
God bless you.
Yeah, no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
all right.
Keep going with the show.
All right. Well, listen, Sonia Dio, as in Ronnie James. Sorry. She can be found on www.the-straight-shooter.com. Folks, you out there, when you hear this, you need to understand, support the lawyers who are willing to, in their own personal life, support you. That's all I'll say on that matter. And thank you so much very much.
Am I free to go?
You're free to go. You are no longer being detained.
All right. Happy Friday night.
All right. Thanks so much. Folks, we're going to take a quick break right now. We're going to spend the next hour talking about yet another developing ACLU situation. As the saying goes, in the halls of justice, justice is often in the halls. And while we have a government that gives a tremendous amount of lip service, if you will, to transparency, the most abused word of the year 2018/19, you have a state and a municipal set of governments that are hell-bent to provide anything but transparency. If we as a society are to trust, if you will, in our legal system, our law enforcement community, then that transparency must exist. And you're about to hear of a situation where, again, government simply wants no part of any of you understanding their rationale, their behavior, tragic. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We're telling a few of them tonight. Pretty provocative stuff. In our first segment, Attorney Sonia Dio talked about basic human decency and the living conditions surrounding, if you will, the facilities that we house and warehouse people in as part of our criminal justice system. And the outright attempt by your state government to deny them even the most fundamental legal rights in courts of law. Folks, we're not making this stuff up. This stuff isn't happening in some third world nation, some Eastern Bloc country. In the last few weeks, you've had the ACLU rise up against, again, the housing of federal prisoners right here at the Wyatt Detention Center. You had the American Civil Liberties rise up against the inability or the decided failure of the Adult Correctional Institute to provide heat. You've had the ACLU, again, had to rise up to point out that a segment of our prisoner population is in fact not civilly dead. They are alive and well, and they are entitled to the rights and treatment of the American criminal justice system and judicial system, just as any other living body in this country are. And you're about to find out how there's a certain segment of the criminal justice system that clearly feels that they can operate without the watchdog eyes of private citizens groups who are only intent on justice without their watchful eyes. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here on the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center. Here deep, deep, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. 90 Way Boston Street. It's that time of the year, by the way, if you're downtown and it's a Friday night between 6 and 9, swing by the studio, make some faces. Heck, we've had people twerk. Whatever. Just come by the studio if you want to wave signs of protest, pitchforks and everything, it's all good. We are outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. The mothership at coalitionradio.us, where you'll find links to our Facebook page, links to our YouTube page, and to our new podcast page, where we're operating a podcast under Spreaker. We'll take these and all other segments and get them out as quickly as possible so you can listen through any one of your podcast apps. So the theme tonight, for the first couple of hours, is our criminal justice system. You can tell it needs some work. The state of Rhode Island, seemingly despite all the trends nationally, seems to be hell-bent on obscuring, obfuscating, removing from plain view, if you will, the goings-on of our police departments, our court system. We see now where the ACLU again is fighting on behalf of Rhode Islanders, so that in the case of memorandums, Rhode Islanders can have access to them without any legal intervention. We see the ACLU fighting against the notion that you could have warrantless searches of the prescription medical database. We talked about in the first hour tonight the notion that you can be declared simply dead as, if you will, a tenant of the ACI, if in fact you are operating under a life sentence. It's astonishing. You know, I use the workhouse analogy a lot. Quite frankly, it's almost like in a throwback mood to the 18th century, and you have the poorhouses in England. The next hour isn't going to make you feel any better, if that's what you're looking for. Dimitri Leskotis joins us really for the first time here at the Coalition. I've known him for a number of years now as a member of the civil liberties community surrounding particularly Pawtucket and the greater Pawtucket Providence area. He is one of the folks involved in something called the Rhode Island Accountability Project. And by the way, that is riaccountabilityproject.com. There's a direct link to it on facebook.com/Coalition Radio, where you can look into some of the research they've done, some of the cases and the situations that they fought. But we've come to really a moment in time where the state, in conjunction with the criminal justice system, in conjunction with police departments, seems to be working overtime to obscure their behavior at a time when body cams are being incorporated in police departments across the country to provide some level of accountability during violent civilian police interactions. It's almost like we're going backwards in our civil system. And we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about the Rhode Island Accountability Project. And we're going to talk about what we as citizens need to start doing to assert our civil rights here in a state like Rhode Island. Over the past few weeks, we've brought not just the ACLU on, now tonight our Accountability Project. We've brought folks on who are doing First Amendment audits. These aren't happening because folks have just decided to wake up and give people some grief. These are happening as a direct result of the behavior of individual members of our government, of our ruling class. If we don't take the lessons we've learned tonight and find some way to incorporate into all of our daily lives, not just the activists that you'll see routinely on this show, to all of us, we all will suffer. Gradually, our civil rights will erode to the point of nothingness. We as a society can't simply wait for us to be the quote-unquote victim. We can't wait till it's our turn to suffer injustice. We can't wait until one of our family members is arrested on a front lawn of a private residence in Pawtucket, put into jail for an entire day without a reading of their rights, for behavior which was completely legal. Can't wait for that. Because if you do, it will simply be too late. Michi, welcome to the coalition for the first time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat.
for coming on.
It's been a long time.
We've
We've known each
known
other.
there is a community of hard liberty activists in this state who work overtime. Because all of us, you know, we work in the dreaded private sector here today, who work overtime to promote liberty for all. And you folks at Pawtucket have been on the forefront of that for a number of years. And I just give you guys all the credit in the world because, again, you have lives, jobs, responsibilities, businesses. This is something that you just don't have the luxury of kicking back and doing all day. You know, the millionaire Bruce Wayne existed only in a comic book.
Yeah.
There are those amongst us who wear no capes, but manage to accomplish a lot of the same things in their own private time. First of all, give us a little bit of background about yourself and particularly the Accountability Project, how they came to be and what they've been involved in.
Yeah, I'm just your average guy, small business owner, city of Providence. You know, always been interested in civil liberties. You know, libertarian style belief system. That's it basically. How I got into this was just basically a random, you know, traffic stop, and it kind of snowballed into this movement.
Yes. We were all at one point in time were operating under peaceful lives where we went home and watched TV.
Right, exactly.
And,
Something triggers you, yes. I was triggered.
And we joined bowling leagues and Knights of Columbuses and went about our lives, and all of a sudden the hands of fate just sort of reached in, grabbed us by the scruff of the neck, and
Right.
now to quote the immortal Godfather 2, we try to get out, and pull us right back in. So what happened in this traffic stop? What
It was a basic traffic stop for an inspection sticker. Actually, that wasn't even valid. The car was registered in Maine, so that was, you know. But they pulled us over, and, you know, the police officer came. I was a passenger, came to my side of the vehicle, and demanded my ID. And there was somebody in the back seat, too. I looked right at him, and I was looking at the situation, and you know, being a civil libertarian, I said to him, I said, listen, I don't have a problem giving you my ID, but you know, you need to give me some reasonable suspicion to believe that I'm involved in criminal activity. This is an inspection sticker you pulled us over for. And you know, I know how the fishing expeditions work. You know, this is a way for law enforcement to get incidental arrests. They demand ID from everybody in the car, and they hope to catch a warrant or, you know, this is how it works. So I refused. He pulled a tantrum, basically flipped out. You're going to be one of these guys, get out of the car, put me on the sidewalk, decided he was going to search the whole vehicle. And at the same time threatening me, if I find something in the car, it's going to be yours. You know, and at the end of this incident, I was just so aggravated that I wanted to file a complaint against him. And to top this off, he was training a rookie at the time, which really bothered me.
Yeah.
Now, here he is, supposed to be setting an example for protecting civil liberties, yet he's, you know, basically acting like a tyrant.
Right.
And teaching this young female officer, you know, the ropes,
Yeah.
per se.
Training day.
Yes. So I put a complaint in. You know, I emailed back asking how it was going. I finally got a response that said it was unfounded. So I proceeded to ask some more questions. I wanted to get a copy of it. They would refuse to give me a copy of the report under privacy issues. And you know, I responded back. Now, at this point, I was talking between the safety administrator and the mayor in Pawtucket. And they wouldn't release the report. I ended up doing some research, ended up studying the Access to Public Records Act a little bit. This is where the co-founder, Lynn Farinelli, came in. I met her online. She had also had some problems in Pawtucket. You know, her son was involved in a parent suicide, and the police botched up the whole investigation. And sadly, she may never get the answers that she deserves because the investigation was so badly botched.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And she's a brilliant lady, let me tell you. This lady's a pit bull.
And yet, the weight on her.
Yeah.
Just the sheer tragic weight on her every single day.
Yeah.
I can't blame her. I don't know how you don't carry that torch forever.
And the problem is, the way the investigation went down, she may never get the answers because of the way it was handled. There may have been somebody there at the time, but you can't go back and investigate that because now he's lawyered up, and it just turned into a mess for her.
Right. So, you guys found an organization.
Yeah, we studied the law, basically figured out, we studied the Access to Public Records Act, and we saw how the Dare case had gotten internal affairs reports, by asking for them in a batch. Right. And this was, a legal case that they had won, I think, back in 1985.
Right.
And so we basically asked for reports in a batch, in a similar batch format, and we got them. And I was able to look at my internal affairs investigation. It was the questions I had asked, basically, which were, I was wondering what standard the officer had, what was the reasoning for demanding ID. Those were never even questioned. So they did a basic whitewash, and it was unfounded without ever asking any of the hard questions of the police officer that should have been asked. So.
And we're talking here. I want to posture this the right way. Police officers there must be some exigent reason for you to be stopped as a citizen.
Absolutely.
There is, I don't know if people understand that anymore. Because the first reaction you always get is, if I'm not doing anything wrong, I have nothing to be worried about.
Right.
Our good friend John Miner was doing nothing wrong.
Right.
And he turned out he had a lot to be worried about. He ended up detained. He spent a day in jail.
Exactly.
Without his rights being properly read. We're talking about an individual who was a member of the United States military.
Right. Marine.
Marine, honorably discharged, leading a life of was quite happy solitude, literally doing nothing wrong, and you get someone in law enforcement on a bad day.
I don't think it's just a bad day. They've admitted that basically anytime they encounter someone with a firearm, even if it's on his own property, or if you're on your own property, the law really doesn't apply. Their safety basically trump your rights is what they're going to tell you. Even though legally that's not the case,
right.
That's what they're going to tell you.
Right, which is wrong.
Right, it is wrong.
People have a right to be able to peaceably go about their lives without any interference whatsoever from law enforcement.
Absolutely. They need to know where the line is. I mean, and that's the problem here. Law enforcement, the line between your rights and their authority has been blurred to the extent where they just cross over it so regularly that they feel they're entitled to cross over this line.
Right.
And if nobody stands there to sweep the road and show them that line, then they're going to continue to do it.
Right. And they'll encroach ever further because ultimately it becomes moot as to what prohibited activity is now considered the normal course of police business.
Right.
And to your point about the trainee, that's what's carried forward.
Right.
And you're right, I don't think anyone in this room or anyone in any conversation you and I have been involved in want to see law enforcement officers being placed in a position of danger at any
Right.
level. No one wants that, no one's advocating for that, but at the same time, your rights as an individual, whether it be your rights to carry a weapon, whether it be your rights to engage in free speech or freedom of association, whether it be your right to simply exist on a city street. Folks talk about the flag as being the centerpiece of our American nation, our culture. No, that's as important as a flag is. The flag is a symbol. The centerpiece of our American society is to be able to engage in peaceful interference without the interference of the government. End of story.
Absolutely.
There's absolutely.
Unfortunately, most people don't understand this.
Well, there you go, and which is why Americans are increasingly allowing law enforcement to just have their way with them. Again, fishing trips. It's interesting, we had a guest on just last week, and we'll get that podcast out this week and talk about the necessity for civics education as part of the graduation requirement for a Rhode Island education, high school degree. Do you think we need a civics education in this state at this point?
Absolutely.
In your opinion, having worked a lot of the same trails as I have, if you were to ask people what their rights are when stopped by law enforcement, do you think any of them have any clue?
I think it's gaining ground a little bit. I think people are becoming more aware, but most people know.
they're going to simply do the right thing for Officer Friendly.
They're going to do whatever he says.
Right. Because they're conditioned to believe.
And there's a fear factor there too, the intimidation, the fear that they portray,
Right.
purposely portray, I think, you know, unfortunately. They don't need to do that, but think they do it, you know. There's a little bit of an ego.
Right, I think you and I agree
Trip going
there's
there.
a personality that's appropriate to quote-unquote law enforcement these days, that you very often see. We have a shared friend who engages in some rather controversial
Right.
investigatory techniques, and
Very in-your-face type of activism.
yeah, it takes full advantage of today's advanced camera phones, and boy, do you see that come full circle.
Yeah.
These are folks who don't want to be very often the subject of the same techniques that they use on a daily basis.
I have to say, I've gotten some good content from some of those videos. I've you know, not only do we do the internal affairs database, sometimes we will analyze, you know, some of these First Amendment auditors and find footage in there that's troubling. One was, I can give you a good instance, the Rhode Island State Police were at they had a SWAT raid on a home in Pawtucket that some suspect was supposedly in. And they had their SWAT vehicle there. The SWAT vehicle had a Punisher logo plaque,
Right.
big plaque on the front of the SWAT vehicle. Now, the Punisher logo is basically a vigilante symbol. It's a symbol of judge, jury, and executioner. Totally inappropriate to be on a law enforcement vehicle, in my opinion.
Right.
I submitted a complaint to the Rhode Island State Police with a picture of that, and they responded back to me that it was founded and it's been handled. So somebody went out of their way to do that and put that on the Rhode Island State Police vehicle, which is problematic. And that goes to show the mentality of whoever did that. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you thinking?
Well, what you're thinking is that you've got this sort of cowboy, there's this heroic edge. So you going in, busting in doors, and very often for use of a pharmaceutical or a medical device or drug, which quite frankly, very often, more often than not, is a victimless crime anyway. I even hate the term victimless crime, because it's simply not criminality. What we've done is we've come full cycle in this country. Not only are we willing to allow law enforcement to have these extra legal rights of interrogation, of investigation, of intrusiveness, we are also constantly redefining what, according to your natural rights, are fully legal behaviors to become the subject of criminality. So what you've got is you've got this double-edged sword, you've got this pincer movement. You know, we're going to continue to enable this military-like legal law enforcement community, and at the same time, we're going to create more and more targets for them to go after. And we're shocked when ordinary citizens then become the subject of this prison pipeline, where all of a sudden they wake up one day and they find themselves doing nothing wrong, yet somehow.
Well, I mean, with the amount of laws on the books today, everybody's a criminal. I think somebody did a video, there's been a study that's done online about how many crimes you break during the week without even knowing. And I think the guy averages 3 felonies a week.
Right.
So now, basically, we're all criminals, and it all depends on how bad the state wants to scrutinize you to put you in prison. Because there's so many laws in the books that everybody's a criminal. All they have to do is scrutinize you deeply enough, and there you go. There's another criminal. If they need to take you out, they scrutinize you enough, and there you go.
Right. And as legal remedies, in their terms, not mine, have extended into things like civil asset forfeiture, into things like civil revocation of civil rights, licenses, professional licenses, property rights, all of that, as that has extended itself into that, then the ramifications for the individual, because very often the individual is left alone to sort of fight the man on himself, you know, are staggering. I mean, are life-changing, literally life-changing. Take a moment here. We've got Beacon Shipping and Logistics is one of our sponsors tonight. BeaconShippingAndLogistics.com. Imagine, if you will, a worldwide shipper of automobiles based right here in Little Warwick, Rhode Island, dealing with manufacturers, international dealers, international sales forums like eBay and Amazon. And you've got the ability to use them locally for your own personal car and your own personal transportation. It's great stuff. Beacon Shipping Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT, based right here in Warwick, fully insured with a owned as well as brokered outreach that covers literally the planet. So, as we always say, if you've got that car that you purchased on eBay, you've got Aunt Sally's car that you're going to use for your daughter's college education out at USC, assuming you had the money to buy your way into it, all right? Then Beacon Shipping and Logistics is, in fact, the solution. Accountability, insurability, performance, professionalism, and safety. Everything you need when you're talking about one of the most expensive physical assets you own. You are a member of your family's personal automobile. BeaconShippingAndLogistics.com, the original advertiser here, the original. As we celebrate our 5th anniversary, Beacon Shipping Logistics has been with us the entire way. And again, as I mentioned in the first hour when I was talking about the Yacht Club Bottling Works, imagine a local company willing to support a show that talks about topics like these. They deserve your support.
Absolutely.
So please, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT. As you get ready for the year-end college or it's snowbird season and you're moving those cars down to Florida, you give them a call. They're local and professional. If you're just joining us, let's see if I get this right again. Dimitri Lysicotis is joining us.
Lysicotis.
Lysicotis. Just twice the name.
That's right.
We're dealing with professionals, folks. He's working with us tonight, and we're talking about situations arising with regard to the true transparency of your law enforcement community. Now, there is approaching what could be a landmark case here in the state of Rhode Island. Give us a little background on how we got to this point. It was in just, I guess, about 2 weeks or so ago. The state court here in Rhode Island determined that cases of record keeping involving internal reviews of the Pawtucket, Rhode Island Police Department had to follow a full legal process as opposed to simply requesting access to them. How did we get to this point?
All right. We've been requesting internal affairs reports for a couple of years now.
Right.
And we've been getting them internally generated and citizen generated. We've been getting both. Pawtucket, I think we have 2 or 3 years worth of Pawtucket reports online. And we had asked for another year of internally generated reports.
And by the way, you post these on the Rhode Island Accountability.
Yes, it's like a mini database.
A clearinghouse.
I think we have about 2/3 of the cities and towns in Rhode Island up right now.
And by the way, this can be, it's a fascinating study because I can remember a couple of years ago, we had a situation, we alluded to it in the first segment, we're talking about John Minor's situation, where the police officer intervening, if you will, and I'm using that term loosely, in Mr. Minor's thoroughly illegal possession of a handgun on his own private property. He had all the appropriate paperwork. It was stored. It was not used in a threatening manner. Happened to be the same police officer who was involved in a notorious stomping incident at one of the local high schools.
Oh yeah, he was.
Right. So it's not only is it important that we understand and know what's going on in individual cases, that this type of work allows us to put together sort of that quilt.
Right.
And see trends.
Well, you don't really see that because these reports are redacted.
Right.
So there's no personally identifiable information.
Right, but you see the trends.
You'll see a pattern amongst police officers in general of that department.
Right.
You won't know if it's the same police officer who did these. If there's 2 different incidents, you won't know. Like I said, we were basically getting internally and citizen-generated and internally generated reports, and Mr. Milos decided to make an argument that internally generated reports somehow have a special privacy right, and he was denying them from now on. So he denied the request.
Now, he's the city.
He's the city solicitor.
Right.
He denied them. I thought that was outrageous. We've been getting them all along. I get them from other police. I just got a batch from the Rhode Island State Police yesterday that have them. So this is after the ruling. I'm still getting them.
Right. And by the way, no harm has come to any police officer.
No, these are redacted.
No one is being targeted. This is surely the rights of the individual citizen to understand the behavioral patterns of their police department.
Right. That's the only reason we put the website together is so people could go look, in their city and town and see how the reports are handled in their particular department. And then you make your own decision whether you think they're doing a good job. You know, that's not for me to decide. That's for you to decide. You're the taxpayer in your community. You look at the reports.
Right, I should say, the citizen watchdog is a sacred position in our body of government, if you will. The right and the ability of a group of citizens who are outside of the established government to look into and have a clear vision as to what's happening in the government is the first and primary defense against out of control.
Of course. How do you
governments.
have any faith in the integrity of the system if you can't see what's going on?
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ludicrous to believe otherwise.
And on a basic level, how can you expect the rogue element to behave in a decent, civilized manner if they have nothing to fear?
Right. Secrecy is a petri dish for corruption.
Right.
I mean, it's
So
a breeding ground.
So at the time this happened, I remember everyone just kind of stood back. So what was the logic from Pawtucket City Hall? What was the?
Well, I don't think they really. Basically, when I was denied these reports, we went to court recently, and when we went to basically originally we were denied all the reports. When we got to court, the union lawyer, I believe his name is Mr. Penza, and Mr. Callahan, who's the lawyer for the trust for the city, basically the lawyer for the city of Pawtucket through the trust, got up in court and said that they agree that I should be getting some internally generated files, but there are some that they believe I shouldn't get under a privacy exemption, basically stating that these reports are HR related. And they went on to explain that some of these reports may be an officer with a uniform violation or an officer with a haircut violation. And that's a ridiculous argument because you can't honestly be worried about those reports once they're redacted. Once they're redacted, you don't know who the officer is. It's not really, there's no privacy issue there. But Judge Long bought into it. And, I really couldn't understand. I don't know what's going on, in her mind. Maybe she's trying to pass the buck, didn't want to deal with it, doesn't want to, be responsible for the one that, for the person that releases these. Maybe she feels law enforcement will look down on her. I don't know.
Was there any intervention from the police unions?
Yes. One of the attorneys there was Mr. Penza, who's the FOP lawyer.
Okay.
He was the one that made the statements basically saying that, this could be a haircut violation. Let's be serious. We know you're not worried about a haircut violation. Right. We know you're worried about maybe exposing. There must be something in these reports, there's a year worth, that is disturbing to them, and they don't want to release.
Is any of this fall under the quote-unquote policeman's Bill of Rights?
No, not as far as I'm concerned. This would strictly be the APRA law. There's an exemption there for personnel files. So that's what they're basically claiming, that some of these reports may be personnel files, and they would like the judge to do an in-camera review. Now, if we allow, this is a ridiculous argument, because first of all, once they're redacted, it doesn't matter. Right. They're not personally identifiable anymore. So, and the judge, she didn't really look at that. But once, I lost my train of thought for a minute. Once these reports are released, there's no problem. It baffles me,
Unless you've got, see, and here's the problem. In the state of Rhode Island, you've got situations on a couple of different levels. First of all, you've got this, and sadly, it all seems to come out of Pawtucket. The former State's Attorney General, who is Mr. Kilmartin, had propagated this notion, which is being followed and backed up disappointingly by the current State's Attorney General, that memorandums were effectively generated by quasis in different parts of governments are somehow now protected material.
Yes. Similar to the argument they're using with me, somewhat similar.
Right. So, of course, the ACLU, and we're going to get into it in a second, the ACLU is involved in this case. Of course, the ACL goes bat-bleep crazy, as they should, and rile up the citizenry. The problem is that there's a belief now, I'm convinced, by government, that if you just simply bull forward, I guess the old cliche of asking for forgiveness instead of permission. And just see what you can get away with. Draw another analogy completely unrelated to this. There is a provision in the Rhode Island State Constitution that if you increase or incorporate new forms of gaming, there is supposed to be a vote. Pretty straightforward. Most legitimate constitutional experts will agree that the state has violated this with this gaming, the sports gaming. But if no one is there to fight it, as in the case of you and Stephen Brown, or our prior guest and, well, shockingly, Stephen Brown, if no one fights it, then it just becomes established behavior.
Right.
And that's the new government. Whereas there was a time in our not so distant past where if someone in government engaged in some egregious behavior, they resigned, often in disgrace. Now, and it's funny, I'll trace this back to the Clinton days. Remember, everybody remembers Gary Hart, right? He got caught with the girl in the monkey business boat, and when he was running for president, he was admonished and humiliated, and he did the right thing, as they used to say. Bill Clinton worked through it.
Definition of the word is.
Right. And so I'm convinced now that the MO, and you see this with Raimondo, you see this with our legislature. Push forward, push forward, push forward with your agenda. Pass your agenda until someone says no. And then force them to use the legal system in order to turn around the results. And in some cases, you'll have warriors like yourself and your organization fighting on behalf of your constant review of internal affairs reports. In some cases, you'll have the attorney who is just with us, Attorney Dale, who is fighting nobly on behalf of, I'll tell you, talk about an unpopular minority, prisoners with life sentences. You know, you're not going to have people lining up to vouch for them, right? Unless you have someone opposed, and that's the scariest part of today's government, which is why I don't believe you have to be a conspiracy theorist anymore to fear what happens when our gun rights are taken away, and what happens when our Fourth Amendment rights are taken away, what happens when our First Amendment rights are abridged, because there's a clear pattern of government taking us on at every single level, playing, I'll call it a civil rights whack-a-mole, to see what they can get away with.
And they're winning.
And by and large, they are winning. So at a certain point, you know, at a certain point, they'll lose a couple, but they'll come right back.
Well, they have the.
It's a war of attrition.
Yeah, they have the tools to be able to fight this much better than we do.
Oh, you know, they've got a paid legal
team of
system,
lawyers,
right,
yeah.
that we pay for. They've got. I mean, they make the rules.
Yeah, and they're all on the same team. Let's get this straight.
Right.
Judge Long, the union lawyer, and Callahan, and the Pawtucket police are all on one team, and the citizenry is on the other team.
Right.
I'm
Before
sorry
they,
to say it.
right. And before they had Kilmartin
And Will Kilmartin was a Pawtucket police captain.
Right. He went to law school on Rhode Island taxpayers' dime. And this is the guy who did everything he could to spread reefer madness throughout the state. Kilmartin, legally, was an abomination. You know, from the bunker down in Florida, right? I mean, as funny as it seems, it's not.
It's crazy.
Because you've got a pattern of behavior here, which is why it's so important for individuals who have got the cojones, quite frankly, to fight it, and why it's so critically important that individual Rhode Islanders who may not be in the line of fire to understand and support those that are, because eventually it will be if there's a theme for tonight, it's that eventually it will be your turn.
Right.
No one, Jim Morrison said it best, no one gets out alive. And
It's a creeping death, and people don't, I mean, they think it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to you. It's eventually going to happen to you.
Exactly, and it may not be you, it may be your family member.
Yeah.
You know, it may be someone you work with. You know, the police. Again, we talk about the prescription medical database. The police being able to go in without a warrant and look at what medications you're on. You know,
That brings up an interesting topic. We don't know what medications they're on.
we
After,
don't.
after they get on the police force, I think they take a drug test when they first sign up. After that, there's no mandatory drug testing, unless they get in trouble, and it has to be some kind of a drug-related offense where they are ordered to do a drug test. Up until that point, you have no idea what's going on with any of these guys on the street.
And now, if it actually comes to even some public light whatsoever, it will be redacted, and then on top of that, it sounds like you're going to have to hire an attorney if you want any sort of real-time response. Now, what is the methodology that the city of Pawtucket would like you to follow now to get the internal affairs reports, or are they actually saying you're simply no longer going to get them?
No. What they want now is for a judge to do an in-camera review and decide which reports she believes I'm entitled to and which reports may be personnel matters. There might be none. There might not be any that are personnel matters. But this is a big burden on me. We would have to incur the cost of having this done.
Right.
Now, on top of the cost of having these files redacted, which is expensive to begin with, I'd have to incur the cost of having a judge do this. And not only that, I believe the way it's set up now, this is new, but I would have to sue every time a police department denied me, go all the way through this process, go in front of a judge and have the judge look at an in-camera review. It's ridiculous.
Right, which goes to the next methodology we've seen, which is the state of Rhode Island government using cost as a factor, whether it be the, if you will, the truck tolling records and the underlying locations, and the state of government cynically giving it back 18th century maps, and then a former gubernatorial candidate having to use her own money, literally to pay for the photocopying of the records. You've got a governor who preaches transparency using every tool possible to be everything but. This may be the least transparent governor in Rhode Island state history, and this is certainly the least transparent government in Rhode Island history, by any means, by any measure. And yet, we live in a digital world where all of this should be quite simple.
Right.
And that's the irony. We've got the technology to have body cams, yet, and there seems to be at least some progress in getting visuals of physical conflicts and altercations between civilians and the police department, while at the same time we're going in completely the opposite direction with regard to the civil matters and the internal matters of the very legal system that we pay for and ostensibly works for us. Yikes.
It's a scary world.
A couple years ago, they would have called us conspiracy kooks, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't think anyone's calling us that anymore.
All we can do is fight. I mean, I'm in it for the long haul. This case should be in the Supreme Court. I mean, I'm not going to get into details, but I'm pretty sure we're going to end up there.
Now, you're working directly with the ACLU on this.
Yes.
And how have they been as far as because
I mean, they're as disturbed by this as I am, if
right.
not more. I mean, this is.
And I want to point that out because there are those folks who would betray the ACLU as a left-wing organization, and yet one can argue that, and it's not true, but one could try to pigeonhole your organization as a quote-unquote right-wing organization, when in fact you're a criminal justice and a civil rights organization.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like trying to corral a libertarian ideology as left or right. Right. We share some ideas from the left, and we share some from the right. You could go back and forth depending on the topic.
We pick out the ones that are right.
That's right, exactly. We stand up for what we believe in principle.
Right.
And whether that be something on the left, and I agree with it, all right, that's fine. I'm not going to be a hypocrite.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're not.
Right.
I mean, the key.
I'll try not to be. You know what I mean?
No, but you're not. And again, all of these activist organizations that we've had on, yours, right, the legal attorneys, some of the political organizations, are literally looking beyond political implications per se, and are focused like lasers on the civil liberties implications of these issues. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about, correct?
Right, right. We're all in the same boat when it comes to defending this type of behavior. I mean, if you don't know what's going on in government, if government is secret, and whether you're right or left wing, the tyranny is going to affect you.
Right.
The resulting tyranny from this secrecy is going to affect you.
Right. So how can people get involved with your organization?
Well, I think we're going to become a nonprofit very soon. We were just a grassroots, a few people, but I think we're going to become a nonprofit so we can get some grants to help pay for the website. I mean, this website's a homemade website, but the files are on there. We've done it, very low budget, but we need somebody to get on there and really organize it, and we need some funds to continue getting these reports. These reports are expensive. I average them out to about $10 to $15 each, every one we get, and we ask for them in batches. And you know, it can get and there's no logic with some of these departments. Some departments will be $30 a report, some will be $8, some will be $15. There's no logic to the whole system.
It's whatever money they need that week.
Yeah, or how bad they want to hide the information so they can, you know, give you a more exorbitant price maybe. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Well, there is, I mean, when you've got civil rights and civil liberties being run as individual fiefdoms by local warlords,
That's exactly right.
that's essentially what you have
Yes.
here. And in the state of Rhode
Good way to
Island,
put it.
whether it be concealed carry rights, whether it be, in your case, access to public records, whether it be, name the cause, each town consider themselves to be their own fiefdom, their own rules, their own expenses. Some of them are fair, some of them, quite frankly, are outrageous.
Right.
And you're right, it just depends on the local attitude and the currency.
The administration sometimes. Some administrations are a little bit more open than others. I've encountered that.
Do you have anybody you want to compliment?
You know, this is early on now. I haven't requested any files from them in quite a while. But when Socket, they did the best job of redacting the files. They redacted them in a way where they gave me a little key. You know, number 1 was a person's name, number 2 was a place. So you could read the narrative clearly.
Right.
Some of these departments just black out so much that you have, you know, it's very difficult to read a narrative. And you should be able to understand from this report,
Right.
once it's redacted, the basics of what happened. Some make that difficult, some don't. When Socket did a great job, you know, they gave me a little key, and maybe I'll ask for some more reports from them. They have a new administration now, since this was a few years ago. So, you know, maybe they've changed, maybe they haven't, I don't know.
Right. And I'd like to believe in the good faith of a lot of people who work in government. There are a lot of folks who are just simply there to do a good job on behalf of their local community. But when politics interfere with the criminal justice system, and on every single level in this state, and this is, I'm going to editorialize, this is me saying this, not the yes, but when the state of police in this state have become, I believe, politically compromised, then you know we're in trouble, because there aren't many honest, virtuous law enforcement communities left in the state. There's a political angle seemingly everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. I agree with that. Unfortunately, I do see a lot of politics in policing.
All right. So give us a website and give us, you know, again, you can't really comment on the case going forward. The strategies, everything will evolve over time. Once they become public, we'll be happy to report on them. I'd love to have you here anytime. You know, you qualify under what I call the knock on the window rule. You got something that's, you don't even got to call. Just knock on the door. All right? Give the little smiley wave, you know, wave at the window.
I appreciate it.
No, it's
And I got to compliment you. You've done a great job as Libertarian Party chairman, and put a great face on a great idea.
These are desperate times, my friend. You know, and everybody, I would invite everybody to participate in any one of the organizations that we've talked about tonight, because people get exhausted. There's a whole lot of folks who are real warriors who are carrying a lot of the burden right now. And, you know, folks, we all benefit from that. I keep us apprised of your 501c3 status, because, quite frankly, every Rhode Islander needs to kick in a few bucks if, in fact, you're doing nothing less than protecting their civil liberties. And I believe that everyone should join the ACLU.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of money that they ask for.
Yeah, I joined.
And
A few years back.
right, and the services they provide are nothing less than astonishing.
Steve Brown's a great guy. He's been awesome to me.
This is the guy, again, we talked about it in the first segment, this is the guy who shows up.
Yeah. Works hard.
No, you know, and his commitment, we can all learn from his commitment, every one of us. You know, when you see someone up there repeatedly 10, 11 o'clock at night, all year round, with cogent, on-point testimony on literally thousands of bills, just knocking it out of the park every single time. I have never seen him unprepared, and I have never seen him ill-equipped to tackle literally an incredible range of legislative subjects. There are times I walk in there with my own opinion, and I listen to him, and I'm like, All right, glad he went first. That's all I can say. Glad he went first. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Pat.
Don't be a stranger, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, so give us a website one more time.
Rhode and the Facebook page. I'll usually put notifications on there. It's the RI Accountability Project on Facebook. And yeah, just keep an eye on the Facebook page. Usually I'll put updates about any files that come up or any interesting news.
All right, super. Thanks very much, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, God bless, lad. Okay, folks, we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to have a quick call-in from Brenda Jacobs. She's going to be talking to us about this week's upcoming rally. Folks, we are the Coalition Loud and Proud. As always, we are outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. We broadcast live here on the Worldwide Coalition Network, on the GoLocal Live Network, and here at the local broadcast center, 90 Way Boston Street, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, coalitionradio.us. Folks, if you just listening to this first time or in the future in a podcast or on our YouTube page, folks, take a moment and follow us and like us in all our respective media formats. It's critical to us. We're, like everybody else, a small organization. We need the public social media contacts to reach out and connect with people. So if you could take a moment and like us, subscribe to our pages, no cost. We don't spam people. We don't sell lists. Just join us. And we can continue to offer, I believe, some of the highest quality programming here in Little Rhodey on some of the most difficult, challenging subjects that you're going to face in terms of public discourse. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back. Listen, I just wanted to take this moment right now to bring in someone who's been a frequent offender on the show for a few months now. Brenda Jacob is on the line, and she's going to talk about a critical event coming up this Tuesday night, correct? Or this Tuesday afternoon,
Yep.
Tuesday evening. All right, so what's going on? Where are things? This is for our special friends at the Rhode Island State Senate.
Yeah, the Senate Judiciary hearing is going to be hearing all of the gun bills that mirror the ones that we already were up there for in the House. Most of them are all the same. I do have one that really is glaringly sticking out at us, though, which is a new one that's coming out on just the Senate side. And that one is that they're going to require gun dealers and stores to send in a report on a monthly basis to list a summary of all gun sales transfers in the state of Rhode Island. So that is one step closer to registration.
That really is a registry. I mean, you essentially over time are going to create a gun registry with that.
Right. At this point, They say that they're not going to require the individual's name, but we all know that when you purchase a firearm, you know, your paper goes into the local police department and the AG's office. So, you know, it's not going to take them a lot to connect the dots. And we all know how Rhode Island works. You know, next year they're going to add one sentence in there, and it'll say name and address. So that one's very, very scary. And that's not the only one that is considering registration. The assault rifle ban also lists that if you are grandfathered, that you will also have to register that firearm with your local police department. So these bills are super bad. So we are all going to be up there at the State House again on Tuesday, and we really need everybody's help, and we need everybody to come on up, sign in, and help support the Second Amendment.
Now, I just want to touch on a couple of things quickly. First of all, did you take heart? Speaker Mattiello was widely quoted as saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he will not charge taxes for a constitutional right. That's pretty strong language. That's not your normal political dance that you get, and I'm not taking that shot at him, but in general, that's about as blunt a constitutional argument that I think I've ever heard from a Rhode Island, a highly placed Rhode Island politician. How does that make you guys feel?
That makes us feel good. It really does. The governor's rebuttal to that is kind of like he's going to have to figure out then where the other income is going to come from in the budget. That's pretty much her rebuttal on that, because she was asked about that.
Wow, there's leadership. You know,
yeah.
don't go my way, and I'm taking my ball home, and you can run with it.
Right.
How's that working out for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and again, you know, it's touched on by someone's show I listen to all the time, Dan York. You know, the fear that she's preaching. You know, I was there late at the House hearings just a couple weeks ago, and before I testified, and you actually had the specter of an adult who has not been the subject of physical violence talking about how when she has her study or private work time, she does it in her work closet. With the door to her office locked. And I don't want to diminish people's fear, but you know how this climate of fear that the governor is creating.
That's a tactic. It really is a tactic, because they like to make people fearful, and it's a tactic. And I got to tell you, as a firearms instructor, I've actually seen an uptick in teachers that really come and want to learn how to shoot. And it's not because they're fearful. They want to know, but not only that, we do have teachers in this state that really would like to carry so that they can protect themselves and kids. So, and I don't see the big fear thing. They don't talk about being fearful in school like she does.
Right. I mean, I'd like to understand how we think it's a good idea between, and I'm removing from myself in the conversation about global warming or about school shootings. But I'm wondering how good of it is an idea that the leadership of the state of Rhode Island will continually whip fear into our children about those two issues. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be discussing those issues in a serious manner. I'm not saying we shouldn't be considering all of the options available to us to mitigate the potential for a school shooting or global warming, but we are turning our children into emotional messes over this stuff because you know, you've got all these kids saying the mantra, I'm afraid to go to school, I'm afraid the world is going to melt, I'm afraid the world's going to freeze. When the statistical possibility of a school shooting in the state of Rhode Island, which is one of the safest schools in that respect in the country, is absurdly small. And do you believe that we're doing real damage to our children by constantly having them operate in this island of fear?
Oh, I believe that it is very damaging to them. And you know, you guys know, on Fridays I'm a coach of a junior rifle team. So I do have a lot of conversations with these kids. And some of the stories that they tell me about how the teachers react and how the teachers are just embedding the fear into some of these kids. And it's disturbing because it doesn't need to be that way. But I feel like they're just trying to indoctrinate fear and into the whole agenda and turning that into the anti-gun agenda. So it's a crazy mix, because here you have one set of teachers that's really trying to be engaged and be safe, and then you have other teachers that are more inner city, and they're just trying to instill fear in these kids, and it's I don't know how to fix it.
No, I'm with you. 2 quick points, and I appreciate you calling in. First of all, I heard there might be pizza again.
Yeah, we're hoping. That was an epic pizza party, wasn't it not?
I get out of work at 8 o'clock. I missed the pizza. I do need a T-shirt though, larger size.
Yep.
But all of this costs a lot of money. So, folks, there is an opportunity for folks to contribute. If they can bring a check even for a few bucks, who should they be writing the check out to?
Well, we cannot take money at the State House.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, we absolutely cannot.
Wait a minute.
But you can go online. You can go online, because they do have like a page that they're collecting money to raise money for the T-shirts. And also join any one of our organizations, the Federated, Rhode Island Revolver and Rifle, Second Amendment Coalition, any one of those groups. We're all contributing money, and that's how we're paying for the pizza, the T-shirts, the buttons, the snacks, is all coming out of funds from those groups.
Wow, I didn't know that. You might be the only organization up there that can't take money. Yikes.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so.
I'm sure that there's some up there that do, but we know we're under a microscope, and we make sure we are 100% crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
There you go. So, again, there's not going to be a rally. It's just going to be a passive, friendly occupation of the State House, starting from the rise of the
Correct.
House on up through the testimony. People can testify. They can submit their testimony in written form, or they can just as easily go up there, be of goodwill and good behavior, and be polite and continue, I should say, to present a really positive image, a positive role model for folks who believe in the uninterrupted, unchallenged right of the individual to bear arms. And that's what you're asking for folks to do. Break out that yellow T-shirt.
Yep, Yep, come up, and then they'll have sign-up sheets, because it is a hearing, so you will have the opportunity to sign. There's 10 bills that we are opposing and 1 bill that we're in favor of. So feel free to come up, and you can sign in favor or opposition of the bills. And we'll have a whole team there that will help direct you as to where to go, and you get to hang out with a lot of like-minded individuals.
The sad part is if the circumstances weren't so serious and the potential damage so important, it would actually be a pretty good time, because you'll meet an awful lot of really nice people. I know I did, and I look forward to seeing you Tuesday night. I'll be the guy running up there. As always, I'm one of the last to testify, but I know that you and I will run into each other. And
oh, definitely.
And for myself, from the Libertarian Party, from the Coalition, again, I want to thank your organization and all the folks associated with all the different 2A groups for being citizen patriots and working so hard to observe, maintain, and respect fundamental rights for so many Rhode Islanders who can't be that night. So congratulations to your continued efforts, and I have nothing but profound respect for not only the message you deliver, the manner in which you deliver it. And it's phenomenal to see democracy in action, and you can see it Tuesday night at your Rhode Island State Senate.
Thank you so much, too. I appreciate you letting us come on and be able to talk to people, because that's huge, and it's so helpful, and we appreciate that opportunity.
Well, we'll continue to spread the message. This is Brenda Jacobs. She, of course, is one of the organizers, if you will, of the occupation, the happy, polite, professional occupation, if you will, of the State House Tuesday night from the rise of the House, which is mid to late afternoon. Get there as early as you can. Be there in time for a slice of pizza. Go online this weekend and donate a few bucks so that they can continue to maintain their efforts. So many people work so hard. They do it because it's the right reason to do so. That's our theme tonight. You've got a whole lot of folks in this state who work very hard at protecting the entire state's civil rights, whether they know it or not. So I will see you Tuesday night.
All right. Thank you, and have a great night.
All right, buddy. All right, we're going to take a very quick break right now. We're running a couple minutes late, but Oscar Herrera, he of the great state of Ohio, is going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes. We're going to get him up through the miracle of Skype. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, coalitionradio.us. We podcast, we Skype, we broadcast, we protest, we do it all. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud. As always, outrage, pro and free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network, here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us, the mothership, where you'll soon see links to our new podcast channel, as well as our YouTube channel. This is the hour that we typically refer to as being libertarian fabulous. And folks, guess what? It may say 2019 on the calendar, but it's not. It's 2020. The elections have already begun. Yes, you think it's late March. Nope. Folks are already getting organized. We've just come off of a slew of special elections where my good friend Billy Hunt did spectacularly well, coming in second out of a 4-person audience. And now we must move on. You know, part of the emphasis here at the Coalition in terms of its libertarian programming is the notion that we as a political organization need to focus much more intensively on local elections. If we're to build an organization that will support our philosophy so that we can move forward, engage on a national level at some point, seriously, not just by bringing on the celebrity du jour, but actually develop a bench where folks have a chance to become elected, then become experienced in taking our government, and as we like to say, getting elected to the highest offices possible so that we can leave everyone alone. Yes, that's got to take place at the grassroots level. And it needs to start now. I've weighed in consistently that the celebrity aspect of our presidential elections has been truly a negative influence of the party. And that's not to diminish the hard work that so many volunteers, many of whom are listening, many of whom agree with me that it's time for a grassroots effort. But we've tried it. And in many cases, we've tried hard. But until we build up that local presence with young people like my guest tonight, until we spread the message of liberty at the most basic level of government, until we become a voice in local municipalities, then how can we hope to compete effectively nationally? I'm no longer interested in getting 3 or 4% of the national vote, only to quote unquote sell our platform and our party to some placeholder who is in it merely for personal political gain. And by the way, I profoundly admire Gary Johnson. I do not consider him part of that at all. I think we know who I'm talking about. And I think I know who we're potentially talking about. But it's important that our level of engagement with local office for the calendar year 2020 begin now. And someone who is clearly all over it, all about it, is my new friend, Oscar Herrera. Oscar, he's running for the General Assembly, as we call it anyway, in the great state of Ohio, as we're going to call it the Ohio 96, as a libertarian, as a liberty warrior. Oscar, welcome to the coalition for the very first time.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for having me.
No, I profoundly admire your not only, let me phrase it this way. I consider people who run for political office to be the highest form of patriotism in this state, in this country can imagine. And of course, you know, with profound respect to folks who engage in the terrible work of defending our country. But running for office is the second most challenging thing that you could do for this nation. You expose your family to all sorts of press, to media, to individuals. It takes away from your personal life, your time, your careers, but you're doing the right thing. So one of the questions we always open up with, we always ask guests like yourself, is we call it, when was your libertarian moment? When did you decide, in fact, that not only were you going to be a libertarian warrior, but you were going to adopt the mantle, if you will, of the big L?
For me, that was quite a process. I really didn't get politically involved until 2008 with Obama. I bought into the hype of him. In 2012, I started really paying attention, and I had the privilege of reading Ayn Rand's Anthem in 10th grade English, and that opened my eyes into, in a way, objectivism, and that was my door to libertarianism. And I started hearing some libertarianism in the Republican Party, and I wasn't aware of the Libertarian Party until 2016. That's when I joined. But hearing people like Ron Paul, Gary Johnson, and the Republican Party talk about liberty, that what really got me invested into libertarianism. Until 2016, I saw the Republican Party heading in a direction I didn't like, but the Libertarian Party was consistent in those principles I agreed with. That I decided to make the jump. I joined and started with the Gary Johnson campaign, and I've been home ever since.
Right. You're very active in the local scene in Ohio. You're also engaging now with one of the national campaigns. But I want to focus on you and Ohio, because the theme for the next few months is going to be not just paying attention. In full disclosure, I am a supporter of Kim Ruff for the presidency of the United States. We've spent some time over the last few months with members of their organization. We're going to get back with them. But in keeping with, I think, the mantra of the development of the grassroots, I think it's important for libertarians to understand the challenges that a state house district like yours endures, get a little bit of a flavor for the state of Ohio, I should say, and also what you're going to bring to the table. So give us a little bit about your personal background, education, what you're doing, and then tell us a little bit about, Ohio 96.
Okay, I'm originally not from Ohio. I'm from San Diego. I've been in Ohio for about 6 years. I love the state. It's home to me. It feels like home. And during my time here actually, it's where I've done the bulk of my political activism, my community service, and in my community service, you meet the people of the district, and the average person, and you hear their frustrations with the system. You hear their frustrations with what's going on in our capital, whether that be the federal or state level, and that in a way has been fueling my desire to run. And I've always wanted to run, but I never felt like I was in a position to until now, and more so, before I ran, I wanted to look at the numbers of the elections, particularly the state representative position, which I'm running in. And for the last 4 elections, it's with the minor exception of one that actually had a challenger on the general election ballot, there really hasn't been a challenger for the last 4 elections. And each election, less and less people are voting for that position. In a county where there's 84,000 registered voters, only 22 voted for the state representative position. So a quarter of the people are voting for that position, while 3/4 aren't being represented, or actually rather don't see the need to vote for that position.
Wow. Now, what's the geography? What towns? What part of Ohio? And tell us a little bit about the nature of your district. Is it particularly, is it industrial? Is it agrarian? Give us kind of sort of a snapshot.
It's very rural, small town Ohio. We're right on the Ohio River. My district covers 2 whole counties and pretty much what is on the main state route. So it's very small town. It used from the history is that we had the coal industry helped the steel industry. The steel industry is slowly coming back with JSW Steel, and the elected officials. I attended a Port Authority meeting with the JSW Steel, and the elected officials really want to help these industries come back. They want the jobs to come back, and they each pledge their support to these companies to bring those jobs back. So what really helps, or rather what's educational about like me visiting, is like you learn the needs of the people, and especially here it's all about the jobs. They want those jobs back. They want that growth back.
Well, I was going to say, and so what are the lunch pail concerns of the folks in the 96? Because what's interesting is we tend to, as libertarians, we focus on some of the big issues, war, peace, whatever Donald Trump is up to lately, whatever abominations he's perpetrating on people. We talk about the war on drugs. What are the challenges facing people in the 96 right now?
Okay, right now in Ohio, we're voting on the Ohio House and Senate are voting to increase the gas tax. The majority of people I've encountered talking on this subject with are opposed to any gas tax increase because we're already paying a high enough tax rate, and yet we're not seeing the results of that tax rate. So what people are wondering is, all right, we're not seeing the results now. Are we for sure going to see them later? So it's the preaching of fiscal responsibility. Like the government always wants to take, but yet they don't learn to manage the little they have and prove themselves with the little they have.
How the war on drugs and the opioid epidemic, is that an issue for your part of Ohio?
Oh yes, it's an issue for Ohio in general. Ohio right now, it just passed a Senate bill. It's a step in the right direction and hopefully breaks the stigma. Hemp is looking to be decriminalized and become a crop, which will be an essential to, especially my counties, which are lowering in farming agriculture. Opioid epidemic, of course. Ohio is big on this. Dayton is doing a good job tackling this. However, it's more politicians tend to what's the word I'm looking for? Prolong the problem, and rather don't let community-based initiatives take the forefront, because a far-off capital does not know the personal needs of the individual, let's say in my district.
Right. So, and that's, one of the biggest challenges if you're me and you come from such a tiny state is understanding how far flung cities like Akron, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus are from, the more rural areas. You've got multiple states in a state, probably only united by their love for the Ohio State University. But other than that,
Yes.
I mean, it's really alternative realities, microcosms within the community. Describe your approach to governing then? I mean, you're going to go up into a state house when you're elected, and for many people, you might be the first libertarian that they meet, particularly in that sort of rarefied air. Yet at the same time, the Ohio Party is so strong. You've got them working so hard for so many years. Do Ohioans have a good grasp in your area on what a libertarian is, what they support, and what they really stand for?
I really don't think so, because people always ask me, like, they know I'm running, people that I'm close with know I'm running, and they always ask, or what are you running as a Democrat or Republican? I reply as neither. I'm a libertarian. In a way, I'm offering them an independent voice to the two parties. Yes, I'm a libertarian, but I have to make the libertarian message understandable to the people, because this is probably going to be the first time they've heard of a libertarian in Ohio politics, rather than, let's say, Gary Johnson in 2016 at the federal level.
Right.
My challenge is to make libertarianism tangible to the people in my district.
Right. What do you think the best way to do that is? I mean, how during a campaign, and like I said, the great thing is you're organizing so early. You're getting a real jump on things, literally just about as early as you can. I know tomorrow's a big announcement for you. So how do you intend to deliver that message to them?
Well, regarding tomorrow's event, I'm preparing a 10 to 15-minute speech on my vision for Ohio, what libertarianism is, my stances on it. But however, I'm going to devote a lot of time to Q&A, because there people I'd rather hear from the individual and not just get a crowd response. I want to know what each person is thinking about, what their issues are, and from that question, give them the answer through libertarianism, and hopefully be able to devote as much time as needed to explaining my position as a libertarian.
Right. What type of organization have you built up so far? Who, do you have a campaign manager yet, or who's actually going to be running your campaign?
Right now it's just me. I have a few people who have volunteered to help me out with communications, my website, IT. My family has been supportive. My mom's helping me with campaign management, expenditures, and all that. My youngest brother, is going to help me with social media, since he is more up to date on that than I am, which is funny considering I was social media coordinator for Gary Johnson in Ohio.
And by the way, give folks the name of your website right now. It's a beautiful website. It's great. You're off to a great start. But give folks where they can find you on the web.
All right, it's electoscarherrera.com. Oscar spelled Oscar, Herrera, Herrera.
Excellent. So what issues on a more of a global level do you hold near and dear? What are your responses to things like war on drugs, military adventurism? What issues really drive you on a personal level?
On a personal level, it's more, I would say, criminal justice, more of, I hate to say the term social justice, but justice in general. Another avenue, if you may allow me to entertain this train of thought, is how I discovered libertarianism, because if I wasn't doing political activism, I would be a pastor. And in my findings of in religion and theology, I came across Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who pretty much gave me my position on the role of a Christian in politics. And it's that not only are we supposed to bandage the wounds of the victims of the state, but we also have a duty to drive a spike through the wheels of injustice. We're not only obliged to help the victims of the state and give them compassion, but we should be participants in stopping injustice and promoting justice. And part of that is like, how do I say, if the state is infringing on the rights of an individual, as a Christian I should be saying no. As an individual I should say no, that is not right.
What ways do you find the state impinging, encroaching the most on the rights of the individual from your personal experience? What really resonates with you?
I think more on taxation, because a lot of people struggle to pay for the bills on the day to day. And especially talking to people in my district, it's like people want to do more with their lives, but they're so strained by the little money after taxes they have. And and with this gas tax, it's going to take away the purchasing power from the people. I don't think politicians in Ohio understand the Laffer curve. Like, yes, you could increase taxes, but at some point, your revenues are going to go down because people are not going to be spending the money that you intended. They're operating under the assumption that current consumption rates will remain the same.
I think most politicians don't understand economics at all in the first place. I mean, when you look at issues like price elasticity, understanding that, for example, you're in Ohio, you're talking about, raising the gas tax. At a certain point, not only is that a highly regressive tax against, in this case, the working poor or the working middle class, but you're also ultimately going to impact economic activity at multiple levels, because once gas reaches a certain price point, people will be able to afford less and or will elect to simply spend less. And the impact of that across the economy is profound. People will go out to eat less. People will go out shopping less. I mean, the trigger effects of taxation on an economy are enormous, and yet economists refuse to accept that. Politicians simply won't accept the notion that as they continue to encroach more on the private sector activities by making them the subject of the state. Here in Rhode Island, where I live, the state just voted to create sports betting, incredibly enough, and now they just voted to authorize the development of an app so folks can bet on sports through a state lottery agency on their phones. And all they see are the tax revenues coming in. They don't understand that private business, which as so many of them will give lip service to as the true engine of the economy, will simply have less money sent to it if, in fact, government continues to absorb more and more discretionary income through governmental activities from a populace whose funds ultimately are finite. They just refuse to accept that, and then are shocked, if you will, when the economy takes a downturn. They don't seem to understand that they have no place interfering with private markets whatsoever. Private markets should be left to themselves. And as you see big government doing that all over the place, you wonder if any of them paid attention in freshman economics. None of these issues are profound. None of these issues require a PhD. My limited interactions with the Ohio state government are twofold. Their continued failure to accept, and this may have changed recently, but to accept medical cannabis as a legitimate form of therapy for the very, very ill and dying. And of course, then there's some guy named Casey, who I stand united with my Ohio brethren in opposing him for anything other than dog catcher, based on his behavior and attitude towards the great Libertarian Party of Ohio. I don't know, man. It seems like the good news, hopefully, being in November of 2020, you've won. The bad news might be that you've won.
Oh yeah.
You gotta,
That, that-
you gotta go to work with these people. Yikes.
yeah, it's a scary thought because like as much as part of my campaign is promoting or rather tapping into the frustration of the voter of saying they're crying out individually, enough is enough. The system stagnant's no longer working for their benefit. What I'm hoping to achieve is to rally these people together because I truly believe that the individual is the salvation of the state. However, one person could only do so much. If you could rally like-minded people and truly show them the power of they have together with liberty uniting them together. They say diversity is our strength. I actually disagree. Diversity is great. Our unity is our strength.
Absolutely. It's
Mhm.
finding, it's diverse people finding common grounds in a culture, in business, in economics, um, that brings and creates community, that creates economies, that then rises the tide, if you will, for all people, regardless of their economic background or any one of a number of their aspects of their personal background. It's what unites us all. Um, I like to introduce myself when I testify in the legislature. I'm a free market capitalist, a truly free market capitalist who believes that free market capitalism is the mechanism by which individuals can reach their full human potential. Folks can,
Mhm.
if they can find financial support for their talents in a free market where competition is open and not and the government doesn't pick winners and losers or create artificial barriers, then that's how people lead full and rewarding lives, doing what they love, prospering from it, and as a result, allowing other people to prosper both from the experience or the economic spin-off that occurs when simply people are successful. That's how
Mhm.
free markets are supposed to work. You know, government trying to ensure fairness ultimately accomplishes neither. So I'm with you 100%. What is the situation on medical cannabis and cannabis in Ohio right now? If you can bring me up to date.
Right now, we do have medical marijuana. It's I think limited to only 21 conditions, but they're looking to expand it to seven more. Last time I checked, there's a local dispensary here in my small village that is hosting these educational forums on it, and it's surprising how many people are coming to these and breaking free from this stigma. This and it's particularly the numbers from the generation who promoted during the Reagan eras of like saying no to drugs and learning that hey, marijuana isn't bad. It's actually a heal. Uh, it's medicine. So the next there's a lot of it's in its infancy, so there's a lot of stuff it needs to to grow, but I'm optimistic in the direction we're going. And there's a lot of activists in the state, and a fellow libertarian, Bob Bridges, is doing a lot, being that I believe he's on the pharmaceutical board, so he's in an advisory role. So it's going in the direction I like, but there, we should not slumber on that just because it's going there. We should take a proactive approach and be involved in that fight.
Now let's flash forward to January of 2021. Oh my, seemingly a long way away, but anyone
Oh
who's
yeah.
run a campaign recently here in Rhode Island, we were amazed at how quickly 60 days could go by in a special election. Um,
Mm.
Given, let's just say you had your choice, and we all know as a first-term General Assembly member, as particularly in an independent party, you probably won't. But if you had your choice to be on any one of a number of committees that are ultimately created by a state General Assembly, what would you pick? What would be your choice of engagement?
I believe finance would be a great place for me to be. I think partly because my avenue towards libertarianism was economic freedom. So if I'm on the finance committee, I could advocate economic freedom and look at bills and see is this in the direction of economic freedom or economic authoritarianism, and that could be in a way a deciding voice whether a bill continues or is dead on arrival.
I love that, by the way. That's a great way of looking at it. I think that's a litmus test that every state legislator, every town councilman, every congressman should look at a piece of legislation. That's outstanding perspective. Um, you know, will this create opportunity for people, or will this pick winners and losers? Will this place barriers to entry in marketplaces for individuals, or will it eliminate them and make competition more accessible? Competition ultimately is the driving force behind capitalism. We eliminate competition, we eliminate innovation. You know, I'm old enough to, it's interesting because I'm hearing now that the immortal words, can Amazon be beat? And I'm old enough to remember a company called Digital Equipment Corp. And if Tom Arnold is listening, he might remember them. And a few of my generation, Tom, if you're out there, hello. You know, Digital Equipment Corp was a computer company. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not. I'm.
That's okay, because that's actually the lesson. The lesson is that they were going to take over the world, and you know, you're a young man, a bright young man, in the year 2019, and you've never heard of them. IBM was going to dominate the world. Apple was going to dominate the world. Google was going to dominate the world. Microsoft was going to dominate the world. Creating innovation ultimately will always take that player down. There will always be, in the case of free markets, a place for someone better, faster, smarter, brighter, and that's what we need to encourage. And you're part of Ohio, and Ohio in general. How would you grade the market for entrepreneurs and startups? I mean, is it a good place to start a business? Do you feel like? What are some of the barriers?
A lot of it has to do with property values and people. A lot of our infrastructure is kind of outdated, so it needs to be modernized to 2019 and not what it looks like 1980s standards. So people who are willing to invest the capital in upgrading the properties, upgrading the buildings, and from there allowing businesses to come in and encourage investments, let's say in downtown Steubenville, where I'm from, or other industries.
Interesting.
The structure is there, but we need the starting capital.
Right. What, you know, Ohio, of course, is famous for, you know, being, you know, a big part, it's a terrible term, the Rust Belt. Is your area prone to innovate? Is there an opportunity to innovate beyond the Rust Belt to create less dependence on that type of manufacturing? Is your area embracing new forms of manufacturing? Where do you see growth coming from?
A lot of the talk is let's bring those old jobs back. So a lot of people are still reflecting on past jobs, past industries. I say nostalgia is expensive. A lot of those industries are taking out property that we could update to encourage other industries to come in. It's funny, John Kasich tweeted to Elon Musk to take over a car plant, and Elon Musk replied pretty much, we'll see, which in a way was a gentle no because the infrastructure wasn't in place. But I think Ohio, the structure is there for those old jobs to come back, but we need to start looking at jobs that will be there today, but also tomorrow for our children and our grandchildren. So we need to have a vision to look into the future and see what can we do to encourage these upcoming industries to come into our area and invest in our area for those jobs to continually be there. Because if you rely on one industry, once that's done, your whole community is leveled. We saw that with the coal industry when those regulations Obama placed back in '08. It leveled a lot of the community here, and they're still barely recovering from it. However, if you have different industries come in, different forms of income, when one's gone, you still have other industries in place to keep that source of revenue for the average person.
Interesting. So, healthcare. Possibly the most challenging, quote-unquote, business issue that a politician, an elected official can face now. You know, it's because it's easy to give lip service to it. At the same time, it's more difficult to come up with ideas that can somehow bring this corral this into some semblance of sanity. What are your thoughts on healthcare right now? What do we need to do, or and how much of a challenge is it in Ohio?
It's a challenge for sure. Most of it is a competency issue. A lot of people feel like from the people I've talked to that the doctors aren't competent enough or don't have the tools enough. And it's hard. It's easy to say that the government should step in and get involved, ho- but it's much difficult. But in the long term, more worth it to empower, to encourage the hospitals to invest in your technologies, in your practices, to give doctors the tools to provide better quality care for their patients. I'm I'm exploring multiple avenues to do this. Artificial intelligence in healthcare could be beneficial via machine learning and newer medicines, alternative medicines like marijuana would be helpful. But at the same time, it's a multifaceted problem with a multifaceted solution.
No, I hear you. Um, wow. Is there much competition in Ohio? Do you have multiple players on the healthcare scene?
Not really. We have one major hospital, especially where I live, that you could go to, but it's unfortunate that a lot of people would rather go to Pittsburgh, which is about an hour drive from where I live for the care. I'd rather people be comfortable, be able to go to their hometown hospital and receive the care they need, quality care. But unfortunately, it's not there, so they have to outsource it to Pittsburgh or West Virginia.
Wow, interesting. You would think that an industrialized state like Ohio would be the beneficiary of multiple healthcare companies and literally state-of-the-art facilities. Is the state doing anything right now to encourage competition or to bring in additional players so that folks can realize the benefit of innovation and competition?
I haven't looked into it yet. Right now, I'm focused on that gas tax, but I have a friend who's going to be teaching me on or educating me on healthcare policy in Ohio and steps we could take to make healthcare more affordable and give people the best quality care they can.
Wow,
Uh,
excellent, excellent. So, how can folks find out about your campaign? Kind of give them the snapshot of websites and Facebook pages, and most importantly, I mean, you go live on the campaign tomorrow. So starting tomorrow, and I'm not nuanced in Ohio state campaign law. Are you able to start accepting contributions tomorrow?
yes, I'm already accepting contributions now, so people can donate now if they feel like they would, if they feel like they can. That's all on my website, as I mentioned before, electoscarherrera.com. I have a Facebook page, Oscar Herrera for 96th District. On there, you will find all my posts on certain issues affecting Ohio, my comments on bills going forward in Ohio. There, you'll have links to my website, my other social media platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. But my website is where you can find the bulk of my information on, especially donations, because I could, with what I have, I could do a lot. However, I feel this campaign has the potential to do bigger than people expect.
And if you will, give us a little snapshot on the incumbent. Is he or she running again?
No, it's all there. Jack Serra is being term limited out, so it's all new people in 2020. New Democrat, new Republican, and for the first time probably in the district, a Libertarian.
And do you get any sense of how they feel about it yet? Do they realize the buzzsaw they're about to run into?
Yes, I ran into a committee member from Belmont County from the Republican Party, and was talking to a friend of mine, and he approached him like, I got something to tell you. I heard there's already someone declared for the 96th district as a state rep candidate, and he's a libertarian. And I'm there. I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. And he was shocked that it was someone so young running for office. I'm only 23, so.
No, hey,
Yes.
get in there early and often. Now,
Yeah.
How large is the district? Because, you know, we've been fortunate here in Rhode Island, in one sense, we can gain scale because at least from a physical size, the districts are very, very small. How big a chunk of Ohio is this? And do you have multiple media avenues to pursue in terms of advertising? Or are you able to run a real grassroots campaign?
I'm hoping to do a real grassroots campaign. Fortunately, my district is a pretty good size. It's only half an hour till the next county over, which is all around the state route, so it's easy to get through. And then an hour later is Monroe County, and I cover the whole county, but it's a lot of villages, so I could do a lot of uh, get out the vote campaigning, door to door, direct mailing, and being that social media is so accessible now, targeted Facebook ads.
Right. Now, I'm not your first interview. I'm already your third interview.
That was on that Saturday was my first interview. I made a few instances. I've started the buzz, telling friends and family, co-workers about my run, giving them campaign material like a rack card of my stances, and that was my first public interview. So
you're already out there in the media.
Oh yes.
You're no shrinking violet. You're not waiting. Folks who contribute to your campaign know that they're going to be getting real effort, a lot of shoe leather out of their campaign contribution, aren't they?
Yes. Thanks to John Faulkner from the Libertarian Party of Ohio. He helped me write my press release. I sent it out to 3 newspapers, 2 news stations. So I'm hoping to get enough coverage for my campaign tomorrow.
Excellent. And will that be on the web, your campaign announcement?
Yes, I will be live streaming that on my Facebook page.
Okay. And so you'll make sure that you share to us when we can watch, and so we can give you moral support from afar?
Yes, it's tomorrow at noon. I won't start speaking till 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so I could give people the opportunity to show up to my event.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I think there's been some audio issues with folks listening. We will be getting the podcast out so that folks who tuned in and didn't have a chance to, or audio may have been in and out from my side, not from yours, will be able to listen to the entire interview. I hope you're not a stranger here. If you've got, and we're going to put this out to all of the candidates running, if you've got money bombs that you're going to be doing, I say this again and again, the Libertarian Independent Media Network that's out there. And while individually we may be tiny, in the aggregate we are mighty. And we cover a disproportionate share of the nation for a political movement. We're everywhere. We need to get behind candidates like Oscar and give him airtime and give him another podium, if you will, an indie media podium to speak from and speak to members of the libertarian movement around the nation. Folks in Rhode Island are very grateful for the support that Bill Hunt got from libertarians across the country in respect to his special election. And the results showed, while we weren't successful, we came in 2nd out of 4 and actually defeated the incumbent. So in a very, by the way, a very blue, very progressive district, we were able to preach the libertarian message to a group of people for whom, many of whom, it was the first time they'd ever heard maybe even the word libertarian, or understood that it was a party, or came to understand that it was a philosophy. And the consistency of your approach and libertarian candidates' approaches across the nation speak well to our future and why we need to support you. Because ultimately, as I started out this broadcast, getting the celebritarians out there, yeah, it'll get a little camera time, it'll give us a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but there is nothing like having a person like yourself literally doing the shoe leather thing over the hills and valleys of small town Ohio to really bring a message home to a part of the country that I believe yearns for an economic message of hope, a message of civil liberties, and a message of strength for community. And so I can't tell you how inspired I am by you getting out like this and getting out early and getting out strong. So congratulations on your effort.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who's supported me so far. It's honestly very encouraging me, and it fuels the fire to keep me going.
No, absolutely. So one more time, give us Give us the web page. Give us where folks can donate. Give us the Facebook page, and give us the timing on your announcement tomorrow.
All right. Tomorrow, tune in to my Facebook page, Oscar Herrera for the 96th District. There I'll be streaming my campaign launch. There you will hear me speech. I'll be taking Q&A from audience. And on my website, on my Facebook page, you will find my website, electoscarherrera.com. There will be a donate button that will take you to my crowd pack where you could donate any amount you feel comfortable donating.
And there's a few dollars. We say this all the time as libertarians. I think we're starting to learn the lesson. A couple of dollars from a lot of libertarians goes an awfully long way in a local election. If every libertarian in America gave you a buck or two, you'd be ready to roll, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah.
And
I'm doing
Go ahead.
I'm doing a lot now, but if every libertarian donated, we could get a win for sure.
Absolutely. Well, again, congratulations. Don't be a stranger, and I look forward to your speech tomorrow. Have a great night.
All right, thank you, Pat. Thank you for having me.
No worries, buddy. We're gonna call it an evening now, folks. On a night like tonight, when we've had folks from across the civil liberties landscape, and now nationally, the beginnings of the 2020 grassroots libertarian effort to change literally how we look at government and how we look at our own individual rights, it's inspiring. Folks, you have been listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network. Outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. As always, we broadcast on the GoLocal Live Network here at 90 Boston Street, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And the mothership, coalitionradio.us. We hope to have this up on podcast form within the next 24 hours, and we'll be circulating it out to the libertarian nation at large. If you're interested in coming on the Coalition, we're going to be reserving time on Friday nights at 8 o'clock, now until as long as we can stay on the air. Contact me at coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. By the way, Billy Hunt will be joining the Coalition April 26th, Friday night. He'll be talking about his campaign, his experiences, his supporters. He did very, very well. He's living proof that you can get significant returns, significant voting by exhibiting leadership, but also delivering a very, very libertarian message. Anyway, I look forward to that conversation. Folks, you've got a lot of places you can spend your Friday evening. If you spend a little bit of time with us now, or during the week listening to our podcast, we are profoundly grateful. Big show next week. We're going to be covering CBD. We're going to be having another libertarian candidate. We're going to be discussing civil rights again. Hope to see you soon. Have a great week.